A huge white castle with blue roofs disappeared into the mountains behind the forest. Moonlight reflected off the peaks on the tops of the roofs. In one of the rooms of the castle, a man sighed wearily and put his head on a stack of papers standing on the table. The old man had a gray beard on his face and glasses on the bridge of his nose. The man wondered what he should do, because the people will soon begin to starve, and the Duke does not care and he does not try to prevent it in any way. Suddenly, a huge fiery comet flew into the castle. From the noise and the flash, the old man got up from the table and looked out the window opposite him. He watched in horror as people fled in panic in different directions, and some of the wounded fell to the ground and lay in a pool of their blood. Unknown knights in protective helmets covering their face with swords attacked civilians and killed them. The old man realized in horror that these were the knights of the Imperial Army. A huge gray-haired old man with a long beard and a crown on his head ominously watched what was happening. A crowd of magicians stood on the walls of the fence protecting the castle, raised their hands to the sky and began to recite some spells. The old man recognized the main magician as Emperor Ryouriban and called him a dirty bastard. Another dozen comets flew at the castle again. The old man ran to the Duke. He stood on the highest roof and watched what was happening. The old man began to beg his head to escape from the roof as soon as possible. At that moment, one of the shells hit the castle tower. The next comet flew into the old man's room. The last thing he shouted was for the Duke. That's how the land of Bran fell. A useless piece of land on the outskirts of the Empire. Suddenly, a young guy with bright red hair jumped out of bed. Along with the Empire, the main character, the butler of the local Duke, also died. Looking in the mirror, the man saw a young handsome guy. He realized that he should have died, but he was reborn into the body of a young Duke 20 years before the death of the Earth. A whole day has passed since the old man was reborn into the body of Duke Aaron. The guy was sitting on the bed clutching his head with his hands, being in a broken state and complete misunderstanding of what was happening. He did not eat or drink anything. I didn't talk to anyone. The main character spent the second day cursing the Emperor, who killed him and all the inhabitants of Bran. The main character fell asleep and woke up delirious, wondering how to take revenge on him. On the third day, the old man finally calmed down, gathered his strength, got out of bed, got dressed, because he realized that he had a chance to change everything. Then he had to dig into books to find out everything about the Duke in his early years. The old man was determined to prevent the impending horror, and a few days later, the main character was forced to stop a severe hunger. The old man was holding a whole loaf of bread in his hands, clutching it in his hands and looking at it carefully. He thought that while he had spent his whole life for the benefit of the poor, who could not even afford a piece of bread, the Duke had never cared about anyone but himself, as if those people were not his subjects. A girl with red hair and a beautiful pink dress and a black rim in her hair flew into the room. She began to shout in fear at the main character, asking why he was clutching a loaf of bread in his hands. This girl was Cheryl, Aaron's younger sister and a former imperial princess. She said that she spent so much time to get the guy out of the room so that he wouldn't get hungry, and he doesn't eat and does strange things with food. The guy laughed, apologized to the girl and said that he was doing it just because it would be more convenient to chew bread. But the guy's face showed that he was panicking and trying not to give himself away. Then he asked the girl if she was free today, as he wanted to go to the same place with her. The girl with contempt and distrust asked her brother about where he wanted to take her. The main character, along with his sister and a bodyguard, were standing on the street. The man reported to Aaron for the work done. He said that by order of the Duke, he was engaged in providing their food. This man was Rommel, a swordsman who is the unofficial captain of the knights. The man asked why the Duke had called him to this place in full armor. In response, Aaron replied that Emperor Ryouriban was planning to destroy their land. Hearing this, Rommel and Cheryl were horrified and could not believe their ears. The girl began to talk about the fact that the Emperor, who was also her uncle, had sworn an oath to their father, which he would not benefit from breaking. In response to this, Aaron replied that the Emperor probably thinks that they will want to exercise their right to the throne. On top of everything else, he added that he had personally been informed that the Emperor was planning to break his promise. After a short pause, Aaron said that he thought it was time to use the dragon's blessing. Aaron's sister looked askance at Rommel and told her brother that he was going to hide the blessing of the dragon as an ace up his sleeve until the last. Aaron said that to the last did not include the betrayal of the Emperor. After that, he asked his sister and the knight if they were ready to move out. Cheryl thought it was a strange decision, but her brother never let words go to waste, and therefore she trusted him. The girl picked up her staff, at the end of which was an imitation of a flower. She pointed this staff forward. The crystal inside the flower lit up and blue energy began to radiate from it. Because of this, a portal opened that led to some other dimension. Suddenly, in a panic, Rommel called out to Mrs. Cheryl. The girl turned around and looked questioningly at the knight. It turns out that, unofficially, Cheryl was a magician, but Rommel did not know about it and therefore was very surprised. She remembered that she hadn't told the man about it and smiled. After entering the portal, all three found themselves on a snow-covered mountain in frosty lands. After that, the girl stopped, began to stretch her arms, still holding her red magic staff in her hands. The men stood behind Cheryl. The girl asked them not to judge her harshly, as she had not practiced for a long time. After that, the girl raised her hand with her palm to the sky and a lump of fire came out of it into the sky. This ball became bigger and took the shape of eyes and mouth. The girl at this moment began to swing the staff. The fire began to change its shape, and then completely divided into several small balls. Rommel, who was watching this, realized in shock that the ring of Inferno was in front of him. After that, with a wave of Cheryl's hand, the ring turned into a huge ball of fire again and crashed into the mountains, leaving behind a large footprint. Rommel stared in shock at the dent left in the mountain. Cheryl turned back towards the men and said it was weak, just above the 7th circle. In shock, Rommel asked the girl if he understood correctly that she was a magician of the 7th circle. The girl answered positively, but suggested that it would be too little to defeat the Emperor's army. Eren cleared his throat to clear his throat and said that it really wouldn't be enough. He also added that they have a lot of time to gain strength. But in fact, the man was thinking that in Eren's diary it was said that the girl is a magician of the 5th circle, but in fact she is an archmage. After that, Cheryl added that compared to her brother, what she does is toys. Rommel, still in shock, turned towards the Duke and asked him if his sister's words were true. Eren smiled and said that now they will find out the answer to this question. The man was worried and gathered his strength to try magic. Yesterday afternoon, reading Eren's diaries, the man found out that thanks to the blessing of the dragon, Eren's sister became a magician of the 5th circle, and the Duke himself became a Grand Master warrior. In this case, it turns out that being in Eren's body, the man also possesses this power. He got up from the table and went to the bookshelf. He took out a book called Fundamentals of Imperial Fencing and looked at it and thought that he was unlikely to become the best swordsman right away and he should start with the basics. Standing on a snowy mountain, the man picked up his sword, raised it to the sky and prepared to test his magic. He stepped forward, gripped the sword with both hands tighter, and the same blue energy as his sister began to emanate from it. Eren shouted and announced the third version of the great sword art called Piercing Wind and waved the blade in the air. A wave of energy headed into the mountains opposite the man and cut off their tops. Pleased with himself, the man sheathed his sword and, smiling, mumbled and turned to Rommel and Cheryl. However, he thought to himself that he was actually aiming at another mountain, but he was also satisfied with this result. Rommel opened his mouth in shock and looked at the mountains. He couldn't believe his eyes. The dragon flew in the sky over the land of Bran. He realized that there was a trace of the blessing he had left here a few years ago in this city and was surprised by it. After that, the dragon flew down to the castle like a bullet. He landed on the ground and turned into an old man. He examined his body and called it a great vessel. Holding a black fan in his hands and waving it in front of his face, the man looked at the castle, hiding behind the trees in the forest. He decided it was time for him to meet the people he had once blessed. A few days before the old man decided to become a duke, he found Eren's diary in the library. Opening the thin binding, he began to read it. A few years ago, with the help of the feudal lord, Eren's father's brother, Uncle Jeron, took away the right to the throne from Eren's weakened old father. And soon the father of the family died, so Eren and Cheryl had to escape from the persecution of the authorities. The reason why the brother and sister were able to survive was in the only condition that their father put forward to his brother in order to protect his children. The condition stated that Eren and Cheryl would not claim the throne, and on this basis the Emperor should allow Eren to become the Duke of the land of Bran at the edge of the Empire. Bran's land was a barren land with a decrepit fortress on it. Hundreds of scary monsters fled to the lands. Nothing grew on that land, and monsters were constantly attacking. Thanks to the dragon's blessing, Cheryl and Eren wield the power of the Grand Master. They have enough strength to establish life on the land of Bran. But Eren decided to hide his abilities for the rest of his life in order to keep the promise made by his father. Having finished reading the diary, the main character closed the thin book. The old man was angry with the Duke because some promise was more precious to him than the lives of his subjects, whom he refused to save during the Emperor's attack. Currently, in the fortress of the land of Bran, a stranger grabbed the hand of a boy. He used some abilities on it, after which the boy realized that his arm no longer hurts. He looked at his healer with surprise. She was a beautiful tall girl with white hair and a purple robe. She told the boy to play more carefully in the future, otherwise his parents would worry. The boy said he would follow the girl's advice. The healer turned out to be a girl named Cecilia, 21 years old, and was a saint of the Vivian Order. She bent down to the boy, stroked his head and called him a good and smart boy. Suddenly, the herald announced that everyone should gather in the square in order to listen to the Duke, who was going to make a speech. The girl turned at the sound and walked towards the square. The Duke was standing on a high stone. There were guards behind him. Eren himself looked at the people of his land and stood facing them. People in the crowd were talking and could not understand what he needed and what kind of speech he was going to say now. They thought that the Duke would talk some nonsense again and maybe even raise taxes, which angered and upset the population. Someone from the crowd asked the other men if they had heard how much the Duke had changed lately. Another replied that he had heard that he had found all the knights who took the roof from people and severely punished them. People were obviously not happy about the gathering in the square and could not understand what the Duke wanted from them, because they thought that he would starve them again. The old man thought that, in general, he was not surprised by such a reaction of the people, because they did not know anything yet and were used to old Aaron, who did not perform his duties at all. The man began to say that intelligence had reported to him that the number of orcs had increased dramatically and they were trying to take away their lands. He also added that if these creatures surround the castle, then the people of the land of Bran will no longer be able to receive food. Aaron urged people not to just sit back and wait for death. The people whispered again that the orcs had been doing such things for years and were surprised that their duke had just found out about it. People have already become disappointed again, because they thought that their head would say something new and serious. Aaron asked the people if they were going to continue to be victims of these green-skinned orcs or if they would go with their leader to fight for their lives. The people were shocked. They didn't understand why their duke would say that, where he got it from and what he was going to fight for. After that, Aaron announced that being the lord of these people and the owner of the lands, Bran gives a new decree that they will no longer sit in a blind defense against the orcs and from now on they are declared invaders. The people were at a loss and did not understand what invaders meant. Aaron continued his inspiring speech and asked his people how much longer they were going to endure the oppression of the orcs. How much longer will they watch monsters live richer than humans? After this phrase, the people rebelled, because they were outraged that some green-skinned orcs live richer than them, working peasants. Aaron smiled at the fact that people fell for his trick and was delighted with the reaction of people. He reiterated that the orcs live richer than humans and said that he and his people are going to overthrow the orcs so that they all become rich. The people began to chant, "Cut the greenskins, more gold." It was clear that Aaron's speech and the promise of riches inspired people. Among the crowd, there was also a dragon in the body of an old man. He was also wearing a robe and hiding his identity behind it. The dragon looked at Aaron and could not believe that the person standing in front of him had received his blessing. The dragon smiled and thought that he did not want to stay in these lands for a long time. But this young man has potential. With the help of magic, the dragon formed some kind of parchment scroll in his hand. Some time later, Aaron was shouting at his subordinate. He was talking about the fact that yesterday he ordered him to buy everything. He asked about why the subordinate didn't even buy 100 sets of armor. The old man asked about the fact that the expedition might fail, but Aaron stood his ground. Then the old man asked what would happen if she still failed, to which Aaron replied that then he would take responsibility. The old man was indignant that if he bought so much armor and the mission failed, then they would have no money left at all and there would be nothing to eat. Aaron in a rage held the old man by his clothes and shouted at him. Then he let him go and they both stood and looked at each other with anger. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. The old man replied that the person who knocked on the door should get out, but Aaron ordered him to enter. The man opened the door and told the duke that a man from Duke Raynon had come to see him. Both Aaron and the old man stood in confusion and looked at the messenger. A dragon in the guise of an old man entered the room. He bowed and greeted the duke. The old man held a scroll in his hands and handed it to the duke. He introduced himself by the name of Kindness and said that he had arrived on the recommendation of Duke Raynon. Aaron, surprised, took the scroll from Kindness' hands and asked him again if he really came on Duke Raynon's personal recommendation. For himself, Aaron thought about the fact that last time Kindness introduced himself as a strategist, but left them a year later. Aaron was pleasantly surprised to see Kindness and noted that his appearance is hard to forget. Aaron unfolded the scroll and began to read it. In it, Duke Raynon was addressing Aaron. He wrote that it had been 3 years since the man settled on the lands of Bran and there was not a day when he would not be unpleasant to remember that Aaron constantly has to fight for existence in this hell. Then there were a few more lines of text, after which it was said that this time the Duke had sent him his promising strategist and some gold for the treasury. Duke Raynon also expressed his wishes that he hopes that Kindness will serve Aaron well in the next 3 years, and he and Aaron will meet again someday. After finishing reading the scroll, Aaron thought about how Duke Raynon was loyal to the late emperor. But suddenly it dawned on Aaron that the scroll mentioned gold. He asked Kindness about it. The eyes of the old man with whom Aaron was arguing a few minutes ago immediately lit up from such news and the mention of money. Kindness laughed softly, waving his fan in his face, and said that Duke Raynon had sent 50,000 gold. The old treasurer exhaled and said that he understood such a sum, because Duke Raynon was also going through hard times. Aaron turned to the old man and told him not to complain, because with this money you can buy enough equipment and even spend the rest to clean up the city. The old man asked his duke about what he meant by the phrase clean up the city. He replied that this was an investment for the future, because it was unprofitable for their land to keep gold in the treasury and it was better to invest this money in something worthwhile. The old man looked at his duke with complete incomprehension as he continued to speak with an intelligent look. Aaron said that if cities are not cleaned up, frequent outbreaks of diseases will begin and then they will lose the most important resource, which is people. The duke also added that the fewer people they have, the more difficult the distribution of forces will be and in the end it will lead to the collapse of the castle. The dragon, listening to Aaron's speech, mentally noticed that his logic was not entirely correct, but it was much more important that his train of thought was going in the right direction. Because few people think as far as Aaron does, and even fewer people remember about hygiene and cleanliness of the city. Maybe Aaron will be suitable for the role of caretaker of the dragon's nest. At this time, the old man left the room and told the duke to do what he wanted, because he was quitting. The old man left the room slamming the door and Eren was left alone with Kindness. Eren looked at the man and was glad that now he had a strategist at his disposal from Duke Raynon himself, and he was already going to memorize strategy textbooks. Very timely, Kindness got to Eren's castle. The Duke turned to Kindness and said that although he was recommended by Duke Raynon, but Kindness probably understands perfectly well that Eren cannot immediately put him as the chief strategist, because the people and the subjects may rebel because of this. Kindness bowed his head and agreed with Eren's words. After that, the Duke continued to speak. He said that based on this, he would be very happy if Kindness showed his skills well in the upcoming campaign against the orcs, and then, in case of victory and success, Eren would be able to appoint him chief strategist without any problems. The Duke asked Kindness what he thought about this. The dragon covered his face with his fan again and agreed with the Duke. He said he would be happy to help Eren in the upcoming campaign. In his mind, the dragon thought that a pathetic person dares to doubt his abilities. He was amused and even interested. Eren summed it up and said he was relying on Kindness. The man thought to himself that if everything goes well, then he will work with this strategist for the next 3 years, which is quite a long time. The dragon replied that he would not let the Duke down and thought that the better he got to know this man, the more entertaining he would become for the dragon. Suddenly, Eren added that his goal after the war with the orcs would be dungeon development. The dragon was surprised and even a little horrified by such a statement. He asked Eren again about what he meant and whether Kindness understood him correctly. A week later, the army of the Bran lands stood in large numbers and fully armed in front of their commander-in-chief, Duke Eren. The Duke said he hoped all the warriors had already learned their strategy by heart. Eren asked if anyone needed to explain everything again. The warriors remained silent in response. Eren was satisfied with this answer and he said that the army was going on an expedition today. Eren shouted that they would definitely destroy the evil orcs and then get rich. The warriors liked this fighting spirit, so they raised their spears to the sky and began to shout. The gates of the protective wall of the lands of Bran opened and a huge army led by Eren headed to battle with the orcs. In the black forest of the land of Bran, Eren and Kindness stood on a mountain. They were watching the orc tribe. The leader of this tribe was called Kurok and he captured one citadel in order to build his nest there. Because of the orcs, all the food lines of the land of Bran were destroyed, and a few years later, just because of them, a massive famine began, which led to the death of most of the population. Eren decided that the problem needed to be cut down at the root, and that's exactly what he would do. Rommel came up to Eren and said that their squad had found kobold shooters. Eren asked the man about how many of these monsters. Rommel replied that they found 5 groups and in each of them about 5 or 6 orcs. Eren called his sister Cheryl. She came out of the tent and reluctantly approached her brother. He twirled his hand in the air and gestured to her what she should do. The girl, taking her magic staff, ran into the forest. There she created a fireball of the 3rd circle and said that this spell is on the 3rd circle, but hits at the level of the 5th. After that, she directed the ball towards the orc village. At this time, the monsters were talking in their own language and actively discussing something. Suddenly, they saw a fireball in the sky, which then fell next to them and set fire to the forest. The monsters scattered into different ones due to the explosion. Eren watched all this from that very mountain. He was not happy that his sister used some kind of 3rd circle power that hits like the 5th, as he asked her not to use the power above the 3rd circle in order not to attract the attention of the Emperor. The girl returned to her brother while he, covering his face with his hand, thought that if he had known that the girl would use spells stronger than piercing wind, then he would not have taken her with him today. Kindness, who was standing next to the Duke, said that the Emperor would sooner or later find out what Duke Eren was doing anyway, and even more so as long as the soldiers did not spread rumors. There should be no problems with this. Eren exhaled and agreed with the strategist, after which he asked him if he had found the right place. The man replied with full confidence that of course he had found what he needed. The day before the start of the campaign, Kindness, Eren, Rommel and Cheryl discussed the plan of action in one of the rooms of the castle. The dragon said that the best outcome of the war against monsters would be to destroy them before the start of a real war, so people don't have much choice. He also added that now the best strategy would be to take the enemies to a place convenient for them and destroy them there. Eren asked the strategist what he meant by a convenient place. The man replied that this was necessary in order to exclude large losses. Kindness also added that the orc tribe has about 2,000 monsters, and even if the people of the land of Bran win, the losses will still be incomparable because they have only 500 warriors. After that, Kindness said that everything else, since it is people who are attacking, then every move needs to be carefully calculated and planned. The man advised to lure out the orcs with the help of cavalry to begin with. Eren doubted that it was worth using 100 cavalrymen as bait for monsters, but Kindness convinced him that it was really necessary. Kindness added that since the speed will be on the side of the people, they will be able to ambush, and then, as soon as the orcs approach the forest, archers and shooters will have to destroy at least half of the enemy troops. Then, according to Kindness' plan, the humans would push them into the open and, with the help of heavily armed knights, surround them in order for them to surrender. Eren thought for a while, then said that the plan and strategy are excellent. After that, the Duke announced that they would proceed according to Kindness' plan. The monsters were trying to escape from the fire that Cheryl had set and escape from this place. Someone from the squad reported to Eren that apparently the monsters had started moving. Kainis noticed that apparently these are not ordinary orcs, since they even have scouts. This means that the monsters will prepare for battle as soon as they sense something is wrong. After that, the man added that if this is the case, then why not make developed orcs their slaves? Eren looked questioningly at Kainis. He continued his speech. He said that in his opinion, such a workforce would help the Duke's goal for dungeon development. Eren was surprised at Kainis' insight and wit. The Duke admitted that the idea proposed by the man was really good, but doubted that monsters would obey a man. Eren said that according to rumors, monsters only listen to the orders of ghosts and dragons. In response to this, Kainis laughed awkwardly and said that orcs are a species that obeys only superior strength, so it is not necessary to be a dragon at all. Eren said he would deal with it later, as he did not want his greed to lead to big sacrifices. Kainis agreed to his order. Eren asked the man if it was time to start their plan. He ordered his sister Cheryl to take 200 soldiers and take up positions in the forest. Eren ordered Rommel to create an iron ring and an ambush. Both obeyed the Duke's order and took action. Eren told Kainis to stay at the top of the hill and he also obediently agreed. Eren signaled to his army and led them forward with him. At this time, the head of the orcs dined at his castle. A subordinate came running to him and reported that the people were going to attack them any minute. The trigger was angry at this news and asked about where these people came from. The subordinate replied that the people were attacking from the Black Forest. Huron called the people of Bran's land insects that were hiding behind stone walls and said that they had finally come out. The orc was sure that he would easily kill them all. Another orc ran out into the street and shouted that meat was coming to them. He called on other monster warriors to kill all the people and capture the castle. The warriors began to rejoice in agreement with the head. The trigger ordered the Minotaur to be released. The gate was opened and a huge monster Minotaur came out of it with an even bigger hammer in his hand. The beast roared very loudly into the sky. The trigger ordered his warriors to kill and loot. A huge and numerous army of orcs, led by their leader Kirk and the Minotaur as the main weapon, headed towards the people advancing on them. The sun was already setting below the horizon and was going to hide behind the mountains. A huge bird was flying over the forest when suddenly she heard a noise. Taking a closer look, the bird discovered that it was a huge army of orcs. It turned out that the eagle served the dragon and therefore he saw everything that the bird saw. The dragon decided that the time had come. At that moment, the army of the people of the land of Bran was running through the forest, led by Eren. The Duke shouted to his men to prepare for a clash and raised his sword into the sky. Eren shouted forward and the human army collided with the orc army. A brutal massacre began. 100 cavalrymen led by Duke Eren fought against 2,000 orcs led by the monster Kurok. The battle began. Eren realized that they were not acting strongly enough and needed to continue to crush the orcs. Suddenly, the man saw a huge axe in front of him and barely managed to hide his head from its blade. In front of Eren stood a huge minotaur. The monster screamed so loudly that people had to cover their ears with their hands. Eren shouted to his army not to be afraid of the Minotaur and ordered them to move on towards the orcs. People again went on the attack on the monsters. One of the orcs started attacking Eren. The Duke had already raised his sword to strike, when he suddenly remembered Kainis' words that the orcs could become a good workforce that would help in the development of dungeons. After that, Eren decided not to kill the orcs, but simply to push them out of his way. The Duke realized that they were in the Black Forest, just where they planned to exterminate the orcs. Eren shouted to his soldiers that there were too many enemies and ordered his army to retreat. The orcs looked at the retreating people with incomprehension. They shouted to each other that the people were running away and they needed to run after them to kill them. Suddenly, a minotaur broke through the crowd of orcs and began to catch up with the army of people. One of the warriors ran up to the Duke and said that they were being followed. Eren said he would deal with the minotaur and ordered the rest of the warriors to go behind the hill. The warriors continued to run forward while Eren abruptly turned around and ran towards the minotaur. At this time, the Minotaur was about to strike one of the warriors. Eren ran and thought that he was not going to lose any of his soldiers. With these thoughts, he used his sword to repel the blow of the Minotaur and his warrior remained alive. The Minotaur flew to the side and fell to the ground. The warriors watched with admiration what Eren had done. The man watched his subordinates and thought that he sort of ordered them to go over the hill, but they did not listen to him. Despite this, Eren was glad that at least he didn't have to drag the Minotaur alone, who was unconscious on the ground from the Duke's blow. Eren ordered Arthur to tie up this monster and throw it away into the bushes. The man was surprised by such an order from his lord and asked Eren if he was going to kill the monster. Eren calmly replied that he would still need the Minotaur, so he would not kill him. Arthur agreed with his lord and said he would do as he wished. Another warrior told his duke that the orcs were advancing. A crowd of monsters stood and looked at the people, intending to eat every single one. Suddenly, several dozen fireballs began to fall from the sky directly on the orc army. The shells fell to the ground and exploded. Eren ordered his army to retreat, and he thought that his sister Cheryl was doing something that did not suit him, because it kills a lot of orcs. However, the trigger remained alive and was going to run after people to avenge his orc brothers. The warriors had already broken away from the explosion site, when suddenly the trigger and several orcs began to catch up with them. Suddenly, the monster running in front of the chicken rolled back on him like a bucket from the mountain. The orc didn't understand what was going on until he climbed further and found that in front of him was a wall of shields that people had built. The orcs looked at the people and realized that they couldn't do anything about it. Suddenly the shields parted and Eren came out of them, straight towards the orcs. He announced to Kurok that he and all his relatives were surrounded, but the Duke would give them all a chance to survive. He announced a duel between two chiefs, Eren and Kuroko. As a result of the duel, the losing race will become slaves. The trigger said that the orc doesn't believe the man. The monster thought that if a person wants to, then all his orcs will be killed, so people cannot be trusted. Eren said he swears by his honor as a warrior, and the trigger will do exactly the same. In response to this, the orc said that man has no honor. Eren was angered by this statement and ordered his army to close their shields again. Hearing this, the trigger growled in displeasure and agreed to a duel. He told Eren to keep his promise, but after that, the trigger with a huge wooden bat in his hands ran to attack the Duke. He intended to kill a man without starting a duel. The orc hit Eren with all his might so that the ground on which he was standing crumbled in different directions. But after the dust cloud dissipated, it became clear that Eren was standing as before, completely unharmed. This angered the orc and he attacked Eren again. However, the Duke managed to dodge again and it seemed that he didn't even do anything for it. Eren thought to himself that, apparently, the blessing of the dragon felt that way. The old man has not yet fully mastered the Duke's body, however, it feels as if it reacts to the orc's attacks by itself. After Eren once again dodged the orc's club, the trigger called the Duke a coward. This angered Eren and hurt his dignity. After that, Eren took the sword in his hands, threw it on the ground and called the chicken a dirty pig, said he would teach him manners. Rommel in horror shouted to his lord with a question about why he threw his sword. In response, the Duke told Rommel not to worry, because he would definitely teach this monster a good lesson. The orc growled, saying that there is honor in a man and decided that in this case, he would also drop his weapon. The trigger said that he would break a man with his own hands. Looking at the duel between Eren and Kurok, Rommel thought that no matter how strong a person was, anyone without a weapon would lose to an orc. This happens because orcs grow up in battles all their lives. They are stronger than most people. Rommel noticed that even the claws of the orcs have become sharper, and his lord is not even wearing gloves. The trigger was preparing to strike Eren. And at the moment when he began to put his hand on the Duke's face, Eren wondered why the orc was moving so slowly, because Eren was only concentrating on him. Eren dodged the orc's blow, but found himself wondering how hard the monster would hit. Therefore, when the trigger once again prepared his fist to hit Eren, he did not dodge. The orc barely grazed Eren's cheek and he thought that the blow was not at all sick, as expected. The warriors behind Eren whispered. It seemed to them that their lord was really being defeated and they began to think about what would happen to them if Eren really lost. The trigger shouted that he would make all people his slaves. The monster growled and then his entire army roared. But suddenly Eren ordered the monster to be silent. With great speed, Eren moved from his place and attacked Kurok. He hit him in the face with great force and he flew to the ground. The trigger stood up and shouted that the man was using magic and then asked Eren about where his honor was. But he only dealt another blow to Kuroko with such force that he flew back to the shields of the army of people, but bounced away from them towards Eren. He grabbed the orc's head with his hands and began to strike even more blows. While doing all this, Eren said that today it is the orcs who will become slaves of people. Unable to withstand such oppression and attacks from Eren, the orc began to beg for mercy. Eren took pity on the chicken. After that, the enslavement of the orcs was successfully completed. Eren was standing on the roof of one of the walls of the orc city. In his hands he held a rope with which the trigger was tied. The Duke was addressing the orcs. He said that he was not going to kill them yet, but from now on they would become slaves of people. A crowd of orcs watched Eren. He shouted that from that day on, the orcs would work on Bran's lands. For this, Eren will give them the right to hunt in the nearby forests, and if their tasks are completed, then people will even share their food with the orcs. However, if even one orc tries to stage a mutiny, Eren will kill them all completely. The Duke warned the monsters that he would wring the neck of each of the orcs standing in front of him with his own hands. Eren asked the orcs if they understood his terms, but the crowd remained silent in response. After that, Eren grabbed the chicken by the head, raised it higher and said that if the crowd remained silent, then Eren would do the same with him as with the leader. After that, the orcs shouted that they understood everything and they heard a man. After that, Eren said that in return for his time spent and as punishment for all their actions, people would take food from the orcs' reserves for themselves. Eren's army entered the walls of the land of Bran. People cheered when they greeted the warriors led by Duke Eren, his sister Cheryl, Rommel and strategist Kynus. The people praised the Duke for the fact that the soldiers returned victorious and they defeated the orcs. Everyone was happy. Eren ordered Rommel to bring the orcs. In the dungeon, Cheryl made a portal through which all the orcs found themselves in the snow-covered lands. Eren used a great swordsmanship technique called Piercing Wind and crushed all the mountains around. The orcs watching were horrified by Eren's strength. The orcs bowed on their knees to Eren, while he spoke about how from that day on they would serve the great dragon power. Aaron ordered the orcs to raise their heads and remember what Aaron alone did to these mountains and the city. He told the orcs to always remember their place in this world. The next day, Aaron called Koushaku to him. He bowed to Aaron on one knee and said that I swear not to reveal the Duke's power to him, and if they try to take revenge, the trigger will stop them. Aaron told Koushaku to remember that if at least one orc tries to do something, Aaron will destroy their entire species. The orcs fled back to the dungeon while Kindness approached Aaron. He told the Duke that he was really able to subdue the orcs and that was commendable. Aaron said that apparently the orcs mistook him for a dragon and that made the task easier. Kindness laughed and asked Aaron what he meant by the word dragon. He told Aaron about whether he knew that dragons never forgive those who pretend to be one of them. In response, Aaron waved his hands and said that Kindness misunderstood him. Aaron said that he didn't even mention the dragon. And apparently, the orcs were imagining something for themselves, and the Duke did not interfere with the flight of their imagination. Kindness laughed and said that it turns out the orcs were just scared of Aaron's strength. To which he replied that Kindness was right and his strength was comparable to that of a dragon. Kindness asked Aaron about what he said, but he changed the subject. Aaron said he would call a meeting in about an hour and asked Kindness to tell the others about the orcs. He said he would carry out the Duke's order. The old man in the body of Duke Aaron walked and thought that his lord with such strength would be able to protect both his lands and his subjects. And even if I couldn't, I would have to at least try. The old man was surprised that the promise to the last king was so important. After that, the old man thought that he was not Aaron anyway and was not going to follow these promises in the same way as nobles do. His main task now is to protect his subjects and the lands of Bran. The old man decided that he would definitely prepare for a battle with the king, which would solve everything. At the duchy's post-war meeting, Aaron said that they had successfully completed the military campaign against the orcs without a single loss, and all thanks to strategist Kindness. Cheryl's sister, hearing these words, seemed offended and angry that her brother did not mention her, but did not say anything out loud. Kindness also said that he was pleased to hear Duke Aaron's praise, but without his lord, nothing would have happened anyway. Suddenly Cheryl's sister couldn't stand it and told everyone to shut up. She asked angrily and shouted about why no one was praising her, because she bravely blew up the orcs with all her magic. In response, Aaron asked Cheryl about who asked her to blow up everyone there. The Duke said that his sister had killed a huge number of orcs, which they could enslave and pump to death with work. In response, the sister began to mimic her brother and pouted resentfully. Aaron continued his speech, summing up everything that happened. He said that now the land available to them has increased fivefold and the Duke believes that it is time to discuss the effective use of these lands. Aaron suggested dungeon development. Everyone in the room, including Rommel, looked at Aaron questioningly and asked him what he meant by these words. A man named Max, who is the administrator of the duchy and part-time spy from the poor aristocracy, asked his lord if he was really going to use the dungeons to lure tourists. Aaron turned to Kindness and asked him if he had made a plan. He replied that he was too busy, but still managed to fulfill the order of his lord. He placed a large scroll on the table and said that this was the main plan of the project called Dungeon Opening and Development. Kindness unfolded a huge scroll. He was so long that he didn't have enough table. Aaron got up from his chair and praised Kindness for the excellent job he had done. But later he added that this plan misses two important details. Kindness, in fear, asked his lord about what he had missed. Aaron shouted that they would probably frame the adventurers, forcing them on the verge of life and death to sign a contract that would force them to be his slaves. Suddenly Max shouted that making people his slaves would have a bad effect on the reputation of Aaron, who is also an aristocrat. In response, Aaron said that he didn't care about his reputation since it was more important for him not to die of hunger. He also added that even aristocrats are human and like all the Lord's subjects, without food Aaron will also die. Suddenly Kindness laughed. He apologized and said that his lord was perfectly able to go beyond simple logic, and this made Kindness laugh. He also said that it was a shame for him that he, the strategist of Kindness, did not understand his master's intentions. He said that he would definitely add to the plan a treacherous setup of adventurers. Max grabbed his head with his hands and called everything that was happening madness, because at this rate the duchy will definitely come to an end. The next day, Aaron went out into the city. He asked the old man if he was really engaged in urban sanitation. The old man said in fear that he was 100% sure that they would not starve to death under Aaron's command, and therefore he would gladly use the entire budget of Bran's lands postponed for the winter, for the sake of the cleanliness of the city. In response to this, Aaron said that the food seemed to be there and besides, they had savings. In response to this, the old man laughed and asked about the savings in question. The old man said that this money was spent on equipment for the war with the orcs, because it could not fall from the sky. After that, the old man summed up that in his opinion such a cleaning of the city would be enough and there was no need to spend the castle budget on it anymore. In response to this, Aaron got angry and said that he had told the old man 100 times that cleaning was not needed for beauty, but so that people would not get sick. For this reason, you need to clean the city all the time. Aaron ordered the old man to pay the workers with food obtained after the war with the orcs. The old man sighed wearily and said that all of them would soon come to an end. Aaron looked at the city and thought that at this rate they would really run out of food and there would be no sanitation. The Duke was thinking about how to solve such a difficult task. At that moment, one of the subjects of Rommel's capital told him that some nun was again illegally arranging treatment. Aaron was interested in this woman. Rommel looked at the crowd of people and told Aaron that, apparently, it was again a nun of their Vivian order treating the people. Aaron reflected on the fact that, according to his recollections, the Vivian order is a religious order that should soon disappear under the pressure of the Perse order. Suddenly it dawned on Aaron that the girl was treating people. One of Rommel's subordinates began shouting at the people that this was unacceptable, because no one allowed them to use religious magic. The people quickly dispersed, and the members of the Vivian order began to hide. One of the members of the order apologized and said that she did not know about such a ban. She said that in that case they would leave. At that moment, people shouted from the crowd. One man begged the priestess to cure his little son, otherwise he would die. Another old man shouted that if Rommel's subjects expel priestesses, then let them at least build a hospital for the people, because this girl somehow helps people and they do not understand why the knights expel her. Another man from the crowd approached the warrior and asked him if he was ready to answer for the death of his son. The girl tried to stop the fight. She said she would come back to them, so people should just wait. Suddenly someone loudly shouted enough, and everyone fell silent. The people looked in the direction from which the voice was coming. Aaron was standing there. He said the nun could continue. Aaron approached the girl and thanked her for helping his subjects. The Duke also added that he has no reason to expel the girl from the city and he personally allows her to help his people. People joyfully began to rejoice. The girl at first did not believe in the words of the Duke and then thanked him for such an opportunity. Aaron was embarrassed and looked away. He said that the nuns could continue the treatment, and the girl needed to go after him. Aaron walked and thought that he didn't care about religion because free treatment is more important. He laughed inwardly and thought that he would make them all plow until they died of fatigue. As soon as Aaron and the nun arrived at the duchy's meeting room, the girl threw herself around Aaron's neck with a hug. Aaron began to push the girl away from him and wondered if she didn't know that holy virgins are deprived of God's blessing when they touch men. The girl knelt down in front of Aaron and asked him if he really wanted to build a temple. Aaron began to drink tea and said that he really wanted to do it and saw no reason not to build a temple. The girl was very happy, but suddenly an old man appeared who said that they could not build a temple because they simply did not have the money for it. And if they build it, then they will have absolutely nothing left in the treasury. Aaron said he knew all this, but they must have had hidden savings somewhere. In response to this, the old man angrily shouted that the last emperor had left this money to Aaron in order to use it as a last resort. In response to this, the Duke shouted that the extreme case had come. The old man quietly bowed to his Duke and said that he would do his bidding. The girl began to thank Duke Aaron endlessly for such a decision, but the man stopped her and said that for such generosity he had one condition for the Order of Vivian. The girl asked about the condition. Aaron said that his condition is the production of holy water. The Duke said that according to the rumors that reached him, holy water can be created directly in the temple. Aaron asked the girl if she was ready to promise her help in the development of the lands of Bran and the production of holy water in exchange for the construction of a temple. The girl happily agreed and said that she would fulfill her promise. Aaron asked the girl what if they had to produce as much holy water as Aaron wanted. In response to this, the girl agreed again. A few weeks later, Kynes ran up to his Duke and reported that the orcs had discovered a hidden dungeon and it was located near their fortress. Aaron asked Kynes about which dungeon he was talking about. Kynes said that according to Kurok, this is some kind of long-abandoned place. In response to this, Aaron asked about whether this was mentioned in any ancient writings and whether this place has no owner at all. Kynes replied that they had found absolutely nothing. He also added that, apparently, now this dungeon has become a den of a wide variety of creatures. The strategist asked his lord if they would develop such a place, because it is difficult for Kynes to imagine how adventurers can be lured there. Aaron thought that no one would believe that a high-ranking dungeon just appeared, even if they made it out of an abandoned one. Suddenly Aaron remembered the nun. The Duke laughed and said that he had come up with a great idea and had found a way to lure adventurers there. Aaron said that they would spread a rumor about the elixir of eternal life, which could supposedly be found there. Kynes said they didn't have anything like that, but in response to this, the Duke said that they actually had one such thing at their disposal and called the strategist to follow him. Arriving at the temple, Kynes saw how the girl treats people and was very surprised. He can't understand what kind of glow it is, what kind of divine power that literally bursts out of the girl's body. Kynes could not understand where this creature came from in these lands. The girl immediately ran towards her master as soon as she heard his footsteps. A strong light emanated from the girl, which blinded Kynes' eyes, but he very soon realized that people did not feel this divine power. The girl immediately threw herself on her master's neck, but he moved aside and she fell on the grass. Aaron asked the girl how her business was going. Privately, the Duke thought that he should not forget that Cecilia is a cheap producer of holy water for Aaron. The girl said that as the Duke can see, they have almost finished the construction of the temple. Aaron said that he came to find out about the holy water and asked the girl if she could already create it. In response to this, the girl said that she certainly has such an opportunity. The girl sat down on her knees and began to pray. She turned to the goddess Vivian and said that her devoted servant had come with a plea. The girl asked to give her a particle of her energy and create a miracle. After that, the water in the bowl in front of the statue of Vivian lit up. All the people standing and watching were shocked. The dragon thought that this was impossible, because this force is inhuman and, apparently, Cecilia is a direct descendant of the goddess. The dragon wondered if the girl hadn't woken up yet. Aaron filled the bucket with water and told the old man to try the water, because he is the oldest and sickest of all those present and the effect will be most noticeable on him. The old man took the ladle in his hands with skepticism. He said that he did not believe that simple water could cure, unlike real medicines. The old man took a sip of water and immediately felt 5 years younger. Now he could jump, do somersaults and almost sit on the splits. Cecilia asked Aaron if her water was better than real medicine. The girl took the guy by the hand and began to stroke. Aaron panicked and began to push the girl away from him. The Duke thought that he just needed to pour some holy water into the dungeon and spread the rumor about the source of eternal life there. But he also noted that the effectiveness of this water is amazing. The guy decided that in this case it was necessary to keep Cecilia. He made a reservation and corrected himself, his cheap producer of holy water, as close to himself as possible. At this time, the girl was still standing close to Aaron, and it was clear from the Duke's face that he was embarrassed by such attention from the girl and he was embarrassed. Aaron called kindness to him. The Duke whispered to his strategist about how hard it would be to spread such a rumor about the elixir. Kindness replied that he was sure there was no such powerful holy water anywhere else. The strategist also added that, of course, water does not grant eternal life, but even this effect is enough for adventurers. Aaron said that since everything was ready, in that case it would be time for them to go to the dungeon. Suddenly Cecilia ran up to her master and said that she had just remembered that she would like to introduce him to someone. Aaron was surprised and asked the girl who she was talking about. Cecilia replied that she wanted to introduce the man to the captain of the Holy Knights of her order. Aaron was surprised and asked the girl if he had heard that the Vivian Order had Holy Knights. It turned out that the Order of the Holy Knights really exists. And, unlike other specialized warriors, they are responsible for defense. These people dedicate their bodies to the divine in order to withstand and repel absolutely any kind of attacks. If such knights unite together, then their defense will not be inferior in strength even to a fortress. However, Cecilia sighed sadly and said that they only had one of the knights left. Aaron asked the girl if the captain would come to them. Suddenly, someone called out to Aaron, calling him a red-haired boy. The Duke looked in the direction from which the voice came and saw a girl in armor there. She told Aaron to stop crowding their saint, because he was not worthy to stand even close to her. The Duke looked offended at the knight. She continued talking and said that she came only because the Holy Virgin decided to build a temple in the lands of Bran. She called this place dead, with weak people and a useless duke, just a pathetic sight. At that moment Cecilia flew up to the knight and calling her Lady Bianca said that she could not talk to her master like that, because it was rude. Aaron, with a calm voice, asked the girl what she meant when she called his people weak. Bianca replied that she really considered their people weak and added that she was ready to obey only the strongest. In response, Aaron, with the same calm face and even a little bored, asked the girl about how many people she had already obeyed in her entire life. The girl shouted that so far no one has been awarded such an honor, because no one will be able to match her strength. Aaron smiled and asked the girl if she wanted to make a bet. Bianca was surprised and asked Aaron what he meant. He replied that the loser of the bet would receive 3 strong blows from the winner and after that they would see if Bianca would obey the Duke of Bran's land. Bianca looked at the Duke with contempt and called him an infirm brat. The knights stood around Aaron and Bianca, while they stood opposite each other and prepared for battle. One of the knights said that it hurt him to watch a battle in which the winner is obvious. Another replied to him that the master had defeated that orc Kirok with the help of the magic of deafening sleep and even fought without a sword. The third knight asked what would happen if Aaron or Bianca were to get badly hurt during the fight. The first replied that they had nothing to do but pray. Aaron bent down to the ground to pick up a thin branch. Bianca was offended and angry, because the Duke was going to fight against her with a branch from a tree. In response, Aaron laughed it off and told the branch not to listen to the bad ant. At that moment Bianca turned to the goddess Vivian and asked her to give her the strength to crush her enemies. Aaron asked the girl why she had been preparing for the attack for so long. Was she really afraid of the stick? The girl got angry and shouted at the Duke to shut up. The girl began to attack Aaron with all her might, but he stopped her with just a stick. Bianca bounced off Aaron and flew into the wall. In response to this, Aaron, with a grin and mockery, asked the girl if one blow of a branch was enough for her. After that, the Duke hit Bianca with a branch again and her shield began to crumble. As a result, he completely broke into small pieces. The girl fell to her knees and bowed to Aaron. At that moment, the Duke said that according to the conditions that they both remember, the loser must withstand 3 strong blows from the opponent. He ordered Bianca to expose herself. The Duke dealt Bianca 3 blows with a stick while all the knights were watching. After that, Aaron announced that the punishment was over and told Bianca that she would never dare to insult him on his own land again. The girl sighed, barely gathered the strength to get up from the ground and turned to Aaron. She said that no one had ever humiliated her so cruelly and asked the Duke to make her his own. But before the girl could finish, Cecilia closed her mouth. Aaron was surprised by such a request from the captain of the order and asked her about what she said. Cecilia continued to close Bianca's mouth and laughed and said that the captain of the Order of the Holy Knights must have been slightly carried away by reading her favorite novels. Aaron was still standing in surprise and did not understand what kind of novels Bianca was reading. The Duke ordered Rommel to assemble a warrior to clear the dungeon. Aaron stood in front of his warriors. He turned to Kainis and said that by removing the soldiers needed to protect the borders, they had only 100 warriors left, which is too little. In response to this, Kainis said that only 5,000 people live on the land of Bran and by law they mobilize every 10th, so it turns out that a large army needs a huge population, which the lands of Bran do not have. After that, Kainis said that even if they suddenly have new residents, they will not have enough resources to feed them. Aaron thought about it and realized that in order to attract more residents, it is necessary to first improve living conditions. Kainis said he would try to find a way to fix their deplorable situation. Aaron agreed with the strategist. Suddenly, Aaron realized something. He decided that if he was not mistaken, then just at this time there would be many refugees in the territory of Count Grey and Count Ammon. Kainis noticed that his master was thinking and asked him what he thought. At that moment, Aaron realized that it was time for him to give his speech to the warriors. Aaron began to say that, as they had all already heard, they were going to go to the dungeon. He also added that they would clean up everything there and take the treasures with them. After that, the warriors led by Aaron headed to the dungeon. There were orcs at the entrance to it. They bowed to their overlord and greeted him. Aaron asked the orcs about how it went there. Suddenly, the trigger said something had happened. After that, they headed to the second floor of the dungeon in the Holy Lands of Atuna. The orc pointed to his brothers lying on the ground and said that they had become some kind of strange. Cheryl asked others about whether everyone feels this strange cold that she feels. These orcs stood up and looked at the people. Their eyes were glowing purple. The orcs headed towards the humans and were going to attack them. The trigger shouted for his brothers to stop, otherwise Aaron would kill them all and beat off the orcs from the Lord with a club. They fell and crashed into the wall. Some kind of black spirit flew out of them. Kainis warned everyone to be careful, because these are ghosts. The ghost flew through Kurok's baton, despite the fact that he was trying to protect his master. The ghost flew to Aaron, but with the help of the sword was able to repel the attack. A bunch of ghosts surrounded the people in the dungeon. Cheryl thought that she would still have nightmares about these creatures. The girl released a fireball from her magic staff and it crushed several ghosts. Rommel called out to Mrs. Cheryl and asked her for help, since neither he nor the trigger can harm these ghosts in any way. After that, Kainis said that he forgot to mention that only magic can hurt ghosts. Rommel said that such an important detail could have been said earlier. Cheryl ordered everyone to stay put and not move. After that, she released another stream of fire from her staff towards the ghosts, and they flew away. After that, they gathered into one lump and let out a long howl, so loud that everyone in the dungeon had to cover their ears. After that, one huge ghost reappeared and Aaron cut it with his sword, charged with the fire of his sister Cheryl. Kainis said that apparently the ghost stayed in this place for a reason, because maybe they even guarded something. Cheryl called out to her brother to come to her. The girl was holding a book in her hands and reading it. After her brother approached her, she showed him the title of the book, which read The Legacy of the Ancients. The girl was reading a book and said that during the time of the Dragon Empire there was a temple of some group of monks in this place, and she also saw about the training of spiritual power. Aaron asked about what these workouts are. Cheryl began to read that unlike magicians using external force, these monks were able to know the power of a different nature, spiritual. Aaron said that this is the first time he hears about inner strength. In fact, the external power of magicians is a vessel that is filled with mana and they receive it from birth, and spiritual power is a vessel that can be increased and changed. Aaron turned to Kainis and asked him if he had ever heard of such art. The man replied that it was quite entertaining. He added that if everything is exactly as explained by Mrs. Cheryl, then thanks to the training of the spirit, even an ordinary person would be able to use magic. Aaron asked Kainis if this meant that his soldiers could also master this magic. Kainis cautiously replied that even if this was the case, he thought it was not worth trying it yet. Aaron asked about why Kainis thinks so. He replied that if you examine the dungeon, you can see blood and traces of endless struggle everywhere. Kainis suggested that the training of this force is so inhuman, or the force itself is so dangerous that in the end they all just killed each other. Aaron thought about it, looked at the book and said that he would hide this thing for now. At this time, on the third level of the dungeon, Aaron and other people were destroying the dungeon and found a chest with a lot of gold. Aaron said that since they were done, the trigger would take only half of the gold in the chest and leave the rest in it. Kainis turned to Aaron and said that he would like to take half of the gold. Aaron asked him why he needed this gold. Kainis said that since this dungeon is pretty simple, it will be difficult to put adventurers in a critical position. Aaron thought about it and agreed with Kainis. He went on to say that therefore, With the help of this gold, he will be able to add several additions to the dungeon. Aaron asked Kynes about what additions he wanted to make. As a result, the orcs built a maze in it under the guidance of Kynes. He looked at the work done by the orcs and said that when the foundation of the labyrinth is done, he is an ancient dragon, orders all the dead to rise. After that, he added a couple of torches in a well with magic water. Kynes tasted the water, said that it had a good taste and it would prolong life for about a year. It only remained to find greedy customers. The adventurers crowded in front of the gate leading to the entrance to the dungeon. One of the adventurers noted that it was pouring like a bucket and thought about when this winter would end. He also noted that all the guards in this place are dressed in brand new armor. Another adventurer suggested that maybe they found something in this new dungeon, such as an artifact. But girl also added that if things are different, then she does not understand why so much spending was needed. After that, the adventurer pointed to the tavern and asked the girl if it was also an unnecessary waste in her opinion. The man noted that other buildings are still under construction, and the tavern looks like new. The adventurer said that this means that they are happy to wait for people like them. Or more precisely, they are waiting for gold, which they will spend in this tavern on alcohol and food. The second adventurer said that if this is the entrance fee to the dungeon, then he will spend quite a lot of money there. After that, the adventurers entered the tavern and the owner greeted the adventurer, calling him by name Gerald. The man also greeted the owner in response and asked him how many people he had robbed to rebuild such a good and beautiful tavern. But there is also a hotel on the second floor. The owner replied that he had by no means robbed anyone and all the money had been borrowed. After that, he changed the subject and asked the adventurers if they had heard that a new dungeon had appeared, because of which many adventurers would soon get into his tavern. Because of this, the man recommended that young people hurry up while there is time. Gerald said he didn't expect to be rushed and he laughed. The adventurer looked around, took out a gold coin from his pocket, handed it to the owner of the tavern and asked him what he knew about the new dungeon. He replied that he had heard rumors about the source of eternal life, but so far these adventurers are the first who are going there. After that, Gerald gave the owner of the tavern another gold coin and thanked him for the information provided and added that he never lets him down. He asked the owner to bring him something to eat because they want to enrich this tavern. The next day, in the morning, Aaron was sitting in the lotus position. A book was opened in front of him in which he read about spiritual power. The Duke thought that he could only use the blessing of the dragon in full force so far, and Kynes correctly noted that these teachings could be dangerous. But Aaron needed his own strength, his personal one. At that moment, Cecilia came up to Aaron and disturbed his meditation. Aaron was startled by the surprise and asked the girl about what had happened and what she needed from him. Cecilia said that she came in order to somehow express her feelings for him. The girl handed the guy a plate with sandwiches on it. Aaron took this plate, but suddenly one of the warriors came running to him in order to give it, and so Cecilia left. The warrior informed his master that the adventurers had arrived. In response, the joyful Aaron asked the warrior about how many slaves there were. The next day, a crowd of adventurers rushed to the dungeon called the Source of Atuna. The adventurer noticed a sign that said that the entrance fee was 10 gold. The girl paid her money, and in response to this, she was handed a payment paper and told not to lose it, since it is her pass to the dungeon. Gerald wanted to enter the dungeon, but the soldiers blocked his entrance and told him that it was impossible to enter the dungeon without paper. Gerald started to say something, but the soldiers interrupted him and reminded him again that you need to pay 10 gold to enter. Other adventurers began to mutter discontentedly and say that this was robbery. Another said that with this money you can feed a family for 3 months and this is some kind of divorce. After that, the warrior announced that he was now declaring the words of the owner of the Bran lands, Duke Aaron. You can always earn 10 gold. But the elixir of eternal life can be exhausted at any moment. Decide for yourself what is more expensive to you. After that, Gerald took out a bag of money from his pocket and handed it to the warrior. After the adventurers entered, they were told that there are many dead people living in the dungeon and if they want to overcome them, they only need a special holy water, which costs 1 gold apiece. Gerald said that he already had water and showed a bottle with it. The one who sold the water said that it was water from the Church of Paris and called the adventurers poor devils who do not know that the holy water of the Vivian Church is much stronger. Gerald stopped, thought, gave the seller a few gold coins and took the water. The seller thanked him and took the money. He also started trying to sell magic equipment and Gerald asked to see it. After that, Gerald saw a sign that said that an emergency rescue request costs 100 gold coins per person. The seller gave Gerald some artifact and began to assure him that this was not a divorce. The man said that this is a special artifact designed specifically for adventurers and with only 100 gold pieces he can save his life. Gerald asked about what would happen if they didn't make the request. In response to this, the seller said that then no one would take money from them. Gerald thought that if they really found the source of eternal life there, they would get rich 10 times more than they would spend here. After that, all the adventurers finally entered the dungeon. At this moment, Aaron and Kynes were happily watching the adventurers enter the dungeon. Aaron called Kurok and told him that the holy water would simplify the battle with ghosts too much for adventurers, and therefore, the Duke asks the orc to go to the dungeon and heat up the situation there. At this time, on the second floor of the dungeon, The adventurer was using ice arrows to fight monsters and fight her way to the source. Gerald thought that if they didn't have this holy water, then everything would be much more complicated. The adventurers, led by Gerald, stood near the stairs and wondered if it led to the last floor. Suddenly, more ghosts flew towards the adventurers, who were already ready to attack them. One of the men shouted at them that they were stupid creatures and threw a bottle of holy water at them. She crashed into the ghost, but did nothing. As a result, the ghost attacked the man and he flew down the stairs. The other adventurers were scared. They realized that these were mutant ghosts and Gerald ordered everyone else to get weapons. However, after that, several more ghosts ran out. Gerald got scared, said there were too many monsters and ordered all the other people to run. After that, the orcs pulled off their blue cloaks, which made it seem that they were ghosts. Bright lightning split the threatening sky. The words were some kind of apocalypse, and dragons were falling from a great height to the ground all around. There were big and loud explosions everywhere, lighting up the entire battlefield with flashes, and very close, in the gloomy city, stood the last fortress of humanity, a beautiful ancient stone castle with a high tower and a sharp spire. One by one, the dragons fell to the ground, and even the biggest, red, powerful dragon, and he fell on his face. There was real devastation below. The city seemed to be on fire. It was like a real battlefield in hell. A gray-haired old man with a thick, gray and long beard looked down at all this. A view opened up in front of him, which seemed to shout that everything was irretrievably destroyed. Suddenly, through the spatial portal, on the left side of him, a young man appeared, the keeper of the auto-time, and said that unfortunately, their world could not be saved. He is even willing to burn his body and soul with the help of the time dragon to open a path to the past for the elder. You can't just lose hope, but you need to give the new generation the opportunity for a good and bright life. Otto believes that with the wisdom of the elder, they still have the opportunity to change the future for the better. The old man replied that he was one of those who best knows the secrets of time, always watching this beautiful place. They all belong to this time, and none of them can leave this world, no matter how much they would like to. At the end of his words, the man tapped his long and beautiful staff, which had a golden twig twisted into a spiral on the top, on the ground, and everything around lit up with ribbons of beautiful and bright yellow light. He kept an old diary with a picture of a dragon on the cover and said that anyone who does not belong to this time will rewrite the fate of all mankind. He sent a direct beam of light into the sky, and a spiral of yellow light and rays poured out from the peak of the tower. It looked like gold rings. In the dark blue sky, meanwhile, something sinister, big and scary was hiding. A huge demon with a lot of big long tentacles and eyes watched as a yellow ray flew at him and thought that these people were pathetic after all. And this struggle makes them even more pathetic. Otto wanted to say his guess, but the elder interrupted him and said that this creature is a forbidden god. Long tentacles enveloped that very ray of light, saying that all these pitiful hopes of people will be swallowed up by deep despair. Humanity, which has let centuries fall into ruins, and with this sad hope turning faster and faster into dust. People realized that the forbidden god was trying to destroy their passage, but they were very belligerent to defeat him. The elder shouted that even if they were just pitiful dust, they would die heroes. May this god witness their final fury. At this time, down below, where the battle was too bloody, all the soldiers looked up at the tower and saw that the elder was trying to perform the ritual of sacrifice. Their century is coming to an end, and very soon they will all die here. The man shouted to his loyal soldiers to join in this great fireworks display of this doomsday, their last day on this earth. Warrior soldiers are proud to sacrifice themselves for a good cause and go after the elder. They are ready to die without regrets. They are people. They present a gift for the future. He will walk along the Milky Way and travel to the distant past to sow the seeds of hope for the future of mankind. And this will be the generation of the ancient wasteland, where beasts and monsters are rampant. Having animal tamers, they fight monsters and get the best resources. Outside the shelters, many dangerous bloodthirsty monsters are waiting for them, where death awaits them at every step. Their main base, Blacklight, has been standing on the dangerous territory of the wasteland for hundreds of years, and its current owner is an extremely strong master. And it was he who created a special camp and training methodology for new tamers. And this is the key to ensuring that the base exists for another 100 years. The action took place inside the big castle Blacklight. A blue-haired young man in a special uniform, which was made of trousers and a t-shirt, stood in front of the announcement that hung on the board. It said there was no place for idlers in the training camp, and those whose eggs had not hatched for 3 years would be immediately transferred to the collection team. And if anyone has objections, they will be killed. Training animals is a huge risk, so you need to enter the camp with caution. The guy looked sadly and with deep sadness in his eyes at his big blue egg that he was holding in his hands, and exhaled heavily. Then he sat down on a large barrel, which stood a little behind, and wondered how it happened. Obviously, his blue egg did not hatch. He only has 1 day left, but he still has no signs of hatching. How insulting it was. Suddenly, the young man saw a bright yellow light in the night sky, and then this same yellow light hit the guy right in the forehead, and the young man fell back to the ground with all his strength. While the guy was lying on the ground for a while in the shape of a star, arms and legs outstretched to the sides. All this time he was seeing a red, beautiful and big, and also a very evil dragon that stretched out its big clawed paws to him. And on this very dragon sat a man, either with a staff or with a spear in his hands. This guy's hair was long and fluttered in the wind. But suddenly the guidance stopped in an instant and he heard that someone was calling him. Something was pressing painfully against my cheek, and beads of sweat were trickling down my temples. One guy with a machine gun behind his back, and a special case with spikes on his shoulder, towered over the blue-haired guy and asked if he really slept right here on the floor. The younger students can't spend the night in the castle, can they? The guy who had a machine gun hanging behind his back started shouting and demanding an answer. The blue-haired man realized that the flying dragons and the mysterious man were just a dream. In this dream he lost it. Are there really such things? The onlookers and that older guy were looking at him all the time and were surprised that the kid was talking to himself like a madman. They can hear it all. Did he take him for some kind of idiot? The young man suddenly received a strong slap in the face while the elder was saying that he had heard that today the boy was going to join the rest of the vagabonds from the search party and go to the wasteland to get food. And after getting out of the base, will he be able to come back alive? Suddenly, a crackling sound was heard from somewhere nearby and the brunette who was standing a little behind noticed that Su Huang's egg suddenly began to crack. The guy quickly sat down and began frantically examining the egg. He couldn't believe it had finally happened like this. 3 years of efforts have not been in vain after all. The elder was a little upset that this garbage still really turned out. Then he suddenly changed his tactics when he realized that now the guy needs to be treated with respect, and turned into a cute cat who said that everything that happened earlier was just a huge misunderstanding. Then he called the guy sir and said that he would inform the head teacher that he had completed an internship and would now become a master. In the future, he is sure that the guy will reach very great heights. Suddenly, someone came up from the side and said that nothing should be reported anywhere to anyone. In front of them stood a fair-haired girl of simply unearthly beauty in an elegant, beautiful white uniform. She was the main mentor of the Blacklight Tower, Lu Yu. She approached Su Huang and said that now he would finally be able to interact with his egg. The guy put his cheek to the egg, closed his eyes. He was still under huge impressions that his dragon would finally hatch. He had been waiting for this moment for so long. Leaning his ear against the egg, the young man happily noticed that the dragon was supposedly talking. The mentor smiled at this and said that it was just wonderful. After all, more and more young animal tamers appear in Blacklight. But a little later, the girl frowned because she noticed a big bleeding scratch on the guy's cheek, and then she asked where he got this wound from. The blue-haired boy pointed his finger at his abuser for hitting him so easily. And then the brunette angrily asked how he dared to hit the master tamer. As punishment, she will reward him with 20 lashes, and then he will be sent to the wasteland to get food. There he will receive another punishment. The young man immediately shouted that it was not necessary, fell to his knees and begged Master Su Heng to spare his poor soul. Meanwhile, the girl forgot about that guy and took Su Huang to the other side. A little later, in a huge beautiful stone castle, Lu Yu and Su Huang were standing in the master's private office, in front of a large table at which the owner of the base, Zhugu, was sitting. Folding his hands in front of him, he asked if this guy was really the first newcomer in this half year. Lu Yu replied that it was true. She heard that he was about to join the search party because his egg never hatched in the end, but suddenly, in some sandy loam way, his egg began to crack. In general, this kid should be rewarded very well. The man noticed that the boy was quite stubborn since he was able to pass at the very last moment. This is very good. Then he told the young man that he had 2 options. First, if his beast in this egg is a scaly lizard, then a man can give him a piece of dragon freshness that contains high-grade dragon blood, and this will speed up the hatching process. After hatching, he will become stronger than other scaly lizards. And besides, there is a small chance that he will be infected with a drop of dragon blood, and then in the future he will become very strong. The second option is that when the time comes to get a second pet, the man will allow him to choose 1 egg from his personal collection. The guy thought that a tit in his hands is better than a crane in the sky, so he will choose the first option. After discussing all the options, the man said that he would order the dragon scales to be delivered the same day, and he really hopes that in the future the guy will not forget about it and will contribute to Blacklight. Hitting his own chest with his fist, the guy replied that he would do everything. As for the castle, in addition to it, the Blacklight itself was divided into 2 zones, internal and external. The inner zone is inhabited by wealthy members of the community, and there is also a cleaner environment. The outer zone, on the contrary, is considered bad and dirty. Representatives of the lower classes live there. The action took place in the outer zone, Su Heng's house. Strange strangled screams came from the house. Su Heng tried to persuade his older sister to let him go, because she grabbed him right by the ear out of the blue. She was just furious and asked where he was last night. And what does he even know about pain if he rides here? This morning she went to the inner zone to look for him, but in the end she could not find him, and she had to wait for him at the gate all this time. She was so worried, and if something happened to him, they have no one else besides each other. What does he even understand? She will just tear off his ears for such behavior now. Suddenly there was a knock on the door of their house. The brother and sister quickly raised their heads at the sound, momentarily forgetting about their altercation. They weren't expecting anyone. A young guy in uniform entered the house, who saluted and said that he welcomed Sir Su Huang, the owner of the castle, who sent him here, ordered to deliver all this to Su Heng. He was holding a tray with coins and some strange closed pouches in his hands, bowed and told the guy to keep it in a safe place. And he also wishes the new master Tamer success in martial arts and in raising his animals. The young man bowed low while Su Heng and his sister stared at him with wide eyes. The brunette's eyes lit up as soon as she saw the coins, and she asked if her precious brother really did it. It's so cool. Mom and Dad would be proud of him and would be happy to know that everything worked out for him. No wonder they sold their last big house, because now her brother will become a very important person in society. Muttering in a strangled voice into his sister's shoulder that Su Huang would still live in the outer zone, he continued to stare wide-eyed at the guy with the tray and the strange gifts that came to them. The girl suddenly remembered that she was going to go to work, and shouted to her brother to behave himself, quickly jumped out the door. And in the end, Su Huang was left alone with the guy, and an awkward silence hung for a while. Everything happened so fast that both guys did not have time to realize that just a couple of seconds ago there was a girl who swept past like a whirlwind. Later, the guy was sitting at the table and examining what was brought to him. In his hands, he was sorting through bright orange balls that looked like voluminous leaves, and wondered if this was the famous dragon scales. Suddenly, this scale lit up right in his hand and Su Heng suddenly saw a reference in his head. Where was the same diary with a dragon on the cover? On the pages of the diary, a diagram was presented, where it was said about hatching an egg and turning into a dragon, dragon scales, about different lizard dragons, about the root of the dragon's blood, about a scaly lizard. When Su Heng looked at this information in his head, his big eyes glowed yellow. But then everything abruptly disappeared and he exhaled, returned to his previous state. Su Heng thanked it is not clear who for such hints in his head. Does this mean that the scaly lizard will turn into a dragon? An adult dragon lizard is a top-class species that can easily destroy a small town. And the one that the guy has is a middle-class kind of scaly lizard. These are two completely different types. The dragon's blood root looks like a brownish-brown root. Will he be useful to the guy? A girl who was so talented that she eventually surprised the owner of the castle and became his student. The first animal she bred was a dangerous high-class species. Now, if the guy could bring out a lizard dragon, then maybe. After a while, the guy was already running with all his legs to the medical store. Su Heng, after laying out a few coins in front of the seller, thought that maybe then he could become an apprentice of the shopkeeper. That evening, at home, with a pen and black ink, Su Heng drew a strange painted circle on the floor, which looked like ritual drawings, and in the center of which lay his egg. Moving a little to the side, Su Heng spread his hands to the sides and then the ink began to glow with a bright yellow light. A thin trickle of light in the shape of a beautiful dragon poured out of the blue egg, and then the light suddenly disappeared abruptly. And then, the shell began to be picked out little by little. Su Heng wondered if it was still a scaly lizard or a dragon lizard after all. The next morning, when the sun had not yet fully risen over the city, Liu Yu was already watching the fighters who were training at such an early hour at the training ground. A couple of guys were discussing the fact that Su Heng's egg still hasn't hatched, and he hasn't attended training for 4 days. Maybe he just died. The second guy said you can't say that. They should just wait for head teacher Liu Yu to deal with him. Suddenly Su Huang came, and the mentor did not meet him very friendly. The guy generally understands that he needs to attend training. The students who were standing on the sidelines realized that the guy was definitely finished now. Ignoring the beads of sweat dripping down his vest, Su Heng justified himself by saying that he had to skip training, but he had a really good reason. Liu Yu maliciously asked what such a reason was, and it would be better if she really turned out to be really serious in order to skip very important training sessions. Turning his head to the left and slightly back, Su Heng told his baby dragon to get out. Huge yellow eyes and blue paws first appeared from the backpack, and then a very small blue lizard dragon completely crawled out, which modestly settled on its owner's shoulder. He purred sweetly in response, looking apprehensively at people new to him. Liu Yu and everyone around him suddenly exhaled in horror when they saw this little beast. It wasn't a scaly lizard at all. It turned out to be a special dangerous kind of dragon lizard. The girl decided to leave the training since this happened, because she quickly went to the owner of the castle and called the guy after her. After a while, the master got up from his chair, knocked on the table with both hands and really confirmed that this kind of dragon is really very dangerous. Is it true that he hatched the guy first? What the hell is going on? Who gave the guy this egg at all? The master looked at the animal that sat on Su Heng's shoulder and looked at everything with his curious eyes. It is necessary to immediately inform the bureau that is responsible for this, and that this person is found and fined 3 monthly salaries. How did they even dare to interfere with the scaly lizard and dragon lizard to create such an egg, almost depriving the future of this young talent? And as for the guy himself, thanks to his work all these years that he has been at the academy, student Su Heng has been through a lot, has eaten through fire and water, and has gained a very useful experience. First, he got himself the most ordinary egg of a scaly lizard, and now he has the most dangerous kind of the highest level on his hands, a dragon lizard. And this is considered a great achievement. And despite all his efforts in the past, the man is sure that this is just the beginning. Of course, the boy will go far as soon as he learns. Su-heng promised the owner of the castle to fulfill all the promises made to him, folding his palm into a fist and putting it to his heart. It was a peculiar gesture. The man is very glad that they have a very talented and persistent young man in such a huge castle, and therefore, he wants to ask Su-hyen if he wants to become his personal disciple. Su-heng did not expect this at all, although he sometimes indulged in bold dreams. Lu Yu was also surprised by such a sudden offer. She didn't think at all that after that genius of Bai Suzu, the master would suddenly want to accept someone else as a disciple. Su-heng replied that of course, he very much wants to become a disciple of the master. Then the long-haired man laughed deeply and hoarsely and suddenly decided that this evening he would arrange a big banquet at which all the tamers would be present, as well as their mentors, who of course would be free. They will all celebrate the arrival of a talented tamer and a new student in their ranks, and they celebrated until the evening. When it was long past midnight, the night lights had been burning on the street for a long time, and bright stars were shining in the sky. Su-heng and his older sister Su-king returned to their small wooden house, and even accompanied by personal guards that the mayor had allocated them while in the carriage. Later, at home, Su-heng decided to brag to his sister that he receives as much as 100 gold yuan a month for the maintenance of his cute pet. Hearing this, the young girl offered to save up a little and buy out their old house in which they grew up and lived happily with their parents until they died, and only then the guy would pay for her education. She wouldn't have earned that much even in 3 years. Here he certainly gives. Su-king pinched her brother, to which he was extremely displeased. A little later, Su-heng sent his sister to rest after a hard day at the plantations, because she had to go to work again tomorrow. And the young man himself sat down at the table and began to read his old diary about dragons. It said that the most striking difference between ordinary creatures and dangerous species is whether they have innate abilities to use magic. The ability to use magic is called magic talent, and talent is a key factor in determining the strength of the beast. The snake dragon lizard, as one of the most dangerous species, naturally has a special predisposition to the use of magic, in addition to the most common evil attack. The other 6 skills of the snake dragon are Dragon Sleep, which is able to quickly restore strength and regenerate injuries sustained in battle. Inferior Strength, characteristic of most of the lower races of dragons, and Dragon Power. Also, dragons use the power of the earth, which is a destructive technique. Natural Power allows you to use the energy of nature and its resources for magic, and the combination of natural power and Dragon Sleep makes the dragon lizard so tenacious that its power increases and it becomes almost invincible. The last skill is the extremely powerful ability Evil. The most powerful technique with destructive power is close to the power of Dragon's Breath. Distracted from a long reading, Su-heng decided to take a short break and therefore looked at the sweetly sleeping baby in the basket. He sincerely believed that his dragon would become the real ruler of all animals. In the next second, this little dragon literally grew out of his little basket in front of the guy's eyes in just 1 second, and Su-heng just fell into a precipitate. He didn't think that dangerous species were growing so fast. The next day, in the master's private training room, Su-heng and the mayor sat opposite each other. The man said that the young man's dragon really turned out to be very talented, despite the fact that if it is too small to draw any serious conclusions. And that's why he offers to test his power in 3 magical elements and choose one that the guy will focus on first. The element of the mayor's beast is evil. The man held out his hand in front of Su, and on his index finger was wearing a gold ring with a beautiful red stone that glowed. Su-heng was mesmerized by this and couldn't take his eyes off it, and he asked if it was by chance the teacher's animal talisman. An animal talisman is a thing that allows you to keep a beast of huge size inside yourself where he can rest and recover. After all, the beast will become so big that it will be difficult to keep it, so tamers often use various ornaments in the form of talismans and rings. From the ring of the master suddenly appeared like smoke, a huge black wolf with burning red eyes, like a demon, a scarlet wolf element evil. It was a representative of a beast with the element of evil of the 2nd rank. He was also the main beast of the man before. And by the way, he is very well suited for training the snake dragon that the guy had, since they are perfectly combined with each other. Su-heng didn't really believe that these 2 beasts could somehow combine, but the scarlet wolf is the most dangerous species, combining not only purebred breed, but also true animal anger, which is very harmonious in tandem with the boy's pet. The master noticed that Su-heng clung to his little animal from the rhinestone in front of the wolf, and therefore told him to let him go to the floor and just trust him. When the dragon finally ended up on the floor, the shadow of a huge wolf completely covered him. The kid looked at Su-heng with fear, hoping that the owner would somehow protect him, but he told him not to rely on him and cope with the wolf himself. After all, this is training for him. The man, meanwhile, ordered his wolf to use his evil breath to show this kid how to attack. The wolf obeyed his master and opened his huge mouth wide with sharp fangs to use his breath, and then ordered him to stop. Because everything worked out, The little dragon that had been sitting on the ground all this time suddenly began to glow with purple rays that looked like tentacles. And then he became furious and angry. After observing the behavior of the animal from the side, the mayor realized that after all, Su-heng got a very smart kid. Meanwhile, Su-heng was encouraging his snake dragon lizard, who tried to growl menacingly at the older beast, but it turned out not to be menacing yet, but on the contrary, too cute. The master told Su-heng that his beast had just comprehended the evil element for the first time right now. This purple smoke is the initial form of the breath of evil thought. Also, this dragon lizard really has a very great talent. Already looking at his first tiny steps, you can easily understand that he has serious potential. And most likely, the scarlet wolf will no longer be useful to him. The master called his wolf back into the talisman, and in the next second, he summoned his other beast. This time an earthen platypus, a trio formed from earth magic, animal essence and intimidation. The dragon can play with him. The dragon was very scared of the second beast and hid behind his master's leg in fright, looking at him with horror. But Su-heng could not help him in any way. The kid needs to overcome his fear, because they are training for him. Su-heng asked his teacher if it was okay not to summon the platypus. Of course, in the end it's up to him to decide, but the man thought about the question for a while and finally agreed, because it would be too easy, so the dragon needs another beast. Then he summoned one of his strongest beasts, the harmony of fire, stone and evil, the dragon, Lava Tyrannosaurus. The new beast was so big that Su-heng was just in wild shock, let alone his little beast, who almost gave his soul. They really had just a huge difference in size, and it seemed that putting them in training was a little unfair. But without somehow interfering with his teacher's decisions, Su-heng asked if such dragons were rare, and the master replied that of course, dragons are very rare. The guy was very lucky that the very first dragon hatched. It's just incredible luck. Without him, most likely, the guy would never have received his second egg. Many tamers still want to get themselves such a beast, but they can't for one reason or another. Sui thought for a second and remembered about that very book. A grimoire with the rituals of ancient dragons must be a very serious thing. The man asked if Su-heng and the dragon were ready for dragon training, and then ordered his beast to act. We need to look at the reaction of the little dragon. The Tyrannosaurus growled so menacingly that Su-heng could barely stand on his feet. What a terrifying pressure this dragon has after all. The guy feels like a tiny boat that is about to capsize from this whopper. The man approached Su-heng, put his hand on his shoulder and told him to move a little further away so that he wouldn't accidentally hurt himself. After a while, the master noted that the little blue dragon was holding up very well, and so he asked the Lava Tyrannosaurus to strengthen his attack. Hearing the order of his master, the beast growled even more at the baby, who was trying to stand on his small paws. We need to see if the baby can withstand this. The master was surprised that the dragon stood firm all this, although he is still very weak. But the kid is trying to use the lower dragon power against the power of a Tyrannosaurus Rex of the highest level. Su-heng's dragon has a very high level of magical talent, but it is unknown if he will be able to break through the terrifying terror of the big beast. The guy asked if the mayor's beast was really that strong. The master answered this question positively and decided to ask if the guy had used the orange dragon scales that he had given him along with the boy. The blue-haired man replied that he used it as soon as he personally got his hands on it. Then the master thought that it looked like his beast had absorbed the substance contained in this very scale very well. Perhaps he was even able to obtain some dragon blood, which helped him double his talent. The master handed Su-heng another book, this time black, with gold patterns on the cover, and said that in it he had collected all the methods and techniques that would help him in the development of his beast. There is also a very interesting method that develops the power of the mind, and he should also not forget about his spiritual training when he trains his dragon. Mind power is his personal power, the basis for training the beast. The boy thanked the teacher, and after leaving the castle, Su-heng was finally able to buy back his family's old mansion. People knew that Su-heng had become a master tamer and therefore treated him with due respect. And while Su-king was working on the plantation, Su-heng set about cleaning the whole house to please his beloved sister. Although he could not make the house the way it was in his memories, but there was still a feeling of great relief in his heart. It was as if he had returned a piece of himself to his rightful place, and now nothing bothered him. Before telling Su-king such good news, Su-heng decided to go to her place of work and pick her up to surprise her. Turning to his dragon, who was sitting on his shoulder, the guy said that it was time for them to send to his sister. After a while, Su-heng ran up to the right place, and suddenly heard a familiar female scream, and then saw that two formidable dogs were growling at his sister. She was numb with fear. Sweat trickled down her temples from exertion, but she could not move, because it seemed that a step to the side and she would be torn into small pieces by these terrible fanged beasts. Su-king tried in every way to drive these dogs away from her so that they would get away from her. But the guys who were standing a little behind only laughed at her pathetic attempts to escape from predators. 3 hooligans, and it just doesn't work to call them anything else, decided to come to her out of boredom, asked the poor girl where she was going, because dogs don't bite at all. They just want to play with her. Su-king, putting all her anger and rage into the request, shouted at those guys to get away from her. but the guys only laughed nastily in response. If she plays with them this evening, then the dogs, so be it, will not touch her. Unable to watch his older sister being bullied anymore, Su-heng intervened and shouted furiously. So they wanted to play, then he will play with this brick. How will they like it? Picking up a decent brick, the guy started hitting the dogs and told these street rats not to approach his sister anymore. The blonde man, who most likely was the leader of their pathetic gang, thinks that if his father is the owner of the plantations, then everything can be wrong for him. The same blonde man looked at his beaten dog Charlie with confusion. This little bastard, how dare he hit his dog at all? The guy shouted to his second dog Jack to bite that impudent brute. Su-king also asked her brother to run away as soon as possible because the forces are clearly not equal. There are 3 of them, and even a dog, and he is alone. But when the formidable Jack almost bit the guy, the little dragon suddenly tried menacingly, and the dog was thrown back. The dragon even bit through the dog's throat, protecting his beloved master. That's how the second animal of the offender was killed. Desperate, the bully took out his last weapon, a knife, but he also intended to finish off the guy who ruined this evening for him once and for all. His friends, who were standing behind him like sixes, also took out knives, which they probably stole from the kitchen of some kind, and rushed to attack. Su-heng put his hand forward and called dragon power, and then purple smoke appeared around the baby. The guys were taken aback by this action and did not understand what was going on here at all. They noticed that there was a dragon with an evil element in front of them, so they had better get away. Suddenly, 3 men in blue uniforms called out to them and asked what kind of scuffle they were having here, and even at such a time. Seeing the approaching guards, the bandits thought, why don't they blame everything on those 2 poor devils? They will be asked to put handcuffs on them, and then the guys will have extra time to get away. The chief grinned and said that he just has connections with the local police, so this is not even a bad option. He'll just ask the guards to arrest this bastard. What an idiot he would make of him when he found himself in a damp and smelly prison cell. And when he cripples such a guy, he will meet his charming sister Su-king right in front of his nose. His dogs couldn't have died in vain. Meanwhile, the guards came up and a gray-haired man asked if it was Ku standing there. He asked the guy where he was going, and he, turning on all seriousness, approached the man, put his hands on his shoulders, thinking that this was a great tactic to ingratiate himself into trust, and began to talk about how that bastard had beaten his dogs to death with special cruelty, for no reason. Therefore, he must be arrested and put in a prison cell as soon as possible, and for a long time. The head of the guard ordered his 2 assistants to arrest Su-heng, and he asked the guy how he dared to touch Mr. Ku's dogs at all. Now he must be a good boy, and they will not hurt him. The men noticed a piece of brick lying on the ground, and then Su-heng told them that it was with this object that he killed the dogs, so if they have nothing to do, then let them ask him. He didn't have much to hide, because Su-heng was sure he was right. The guards took out their pistols, pointed them at the guy and asked how he even dared to kill those unfortunate animals and even in the middle of the street. Well, nothing. He will definitely like it in the camera. But suddenly the men looked over the guy's shoulder and saw the dragon behind the guy's shoulder, and immediately got very scared. It turned out that the guy is a beast tamer. Then the guy also took out a card so that they could finally make sure where it was written that he was a tamer, and told them to open their eyes if they suddenly couldn't see. The guards realized that none other than the master's disciple was standing in front of them. Their boss once said that recently there have been rumors in their database about the second student of the mayor. Is this really the guy? The man suddenly raised his hand with a pistol and asked what kind of impudence it was and pointed the gun at Ku Zheniao, who dared to so brazenly and presumptuously arrange this murder. The blonde, of course, was perplexed by the fact that the captain took the wrong side as soon as he heard that the guy was a beast tamer. Now, quickly changing sides, the man ordered his 2 assistants to immediately put handcuffs on all 3 guys, and if they resist, then you can shoot them right on the spot. After a while, the hooligans were already handcuffed, and Ku asked Captain Jing how it happened. He's the victim, it's definitely some kind of mistake. His father is Ku Dingquan, the owner of the No. 5 Plantation warehouse. His father had done Captain Jing such a great favor, after all. But the guy didn't have time to finish, because he got punched in the face. The captain turned to the other 2 and said that if he tried to escape, then let him be beaten with rods. Then the captain approached Su-heng and said, "They say, who knew that Ku would set his dogs on him?" The man is glad that the guy reacted so timely and rebuffed the hooligans, and even saved his sister, otherwise you never know what else would have happened. Su-heng noticed that the 3 officers also showed up on time. Then Captain Jing was embarrassed and said that if those 3 bandits fall into his hands again, if they don't die, they will skin themselves. Is Mr. Su satisfied? Su-han replied that it was unlikely that bully would die or not, but he would still take revenge on him for setting evil dogs on his poor sister as soon as he was released. Su-heng called Su-king with him and said that it was high time for them, and everything was fine. And holding hands, they went to their home. The officers looked after them and the captain suddenly asked them what they thought was worse, to offend the plantation owner or to anger the master tamer. Another replied that there was nothing to think about. It is better not to anger the tamer at all. You never know what he can teach or even order his beast. They're just small people compared to him, and they don't want to die. The captain noticed that the guy was saying everything correctly and ordered the second one to look for a carriage for them because he and Liudong would wait here. And then they will take these 3 bandits to the camera straight to the incinerator. They'll keep them there and then. Meanwhile, Su King and Su Heng returned to their home, and the girl was just thrilled that they were able to return their home in which they grew up. She never thought that she would be able to visit there again, because it seemed to her that she was in some kind of magical dream. Su Heng also shared her joy, but asked her not to faint and handed her the keys to their new old house. Buying out their old house is just the beginning. It will only get better from now on. The girl shook his hand, said that she believed in her brother and only the best was waiting for them ahead. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Su Heng decided to open the door, and when he did, he saw a man in front of him. He laughed awkwardly and said that the guy was really very forgetful. The man introduced himself as the deputy director of plantation management, Guo. Su King decided to go out into the corridor and asked the man what he was doing here. Deputy Guo replied that he had just received news from the police that Ku Dingquan's son had insulted Mr. Su, so naturally he should do the guy a favor. Guo plans to transfer Ku to the 30th plantation so that he plows the land and is an ordinary farmer. Even though wild animals are rampant there, and all sorts of troubles happen from time to time, he thinks that Ku Sr., who at least was the leader, will be able to adapt to this. Guo then asked if Mr. Su was happy with this arrangement. The young man replied that he was very glad that the director had paid his precious attention to this. Guo also heard that his sister seems to be a senior agronomist in their plantation system, so she can be promoted to the position of deputy director in the department of agronomy of their management. As soon as the girl heard this, she immediately doubted that she was suitable for this position. But the man assured her that she was quite suitable. She's Mr. Su Heng's sister. Of course it fits. And also, if she needs it, she can always find him and ask for a favor. Su King's eyes immediately lit up and she said she would be happy to help. Su Heng stood on the sidelines and thought about how when they get stronger, they get more and more privileges. After a while, the guy tried to feed his pet white food, which was according to the mentor's recipe. It is also very useful for the baby. He will eat and grow and becomes even stronger. Feed formulas for tamed animals are divided into poor quality, average, good, very good, excellent, wonderful, ideal, perfect. There are 8 of them in total. The food that the teacher gave them was of very good quality, just for a young animal. Besides, this recipe is very important for a guy as a student. But why did the kid stop liking him right after he tried it? Maybe it's all about the ingredients. But that's right. As it is said in rituals of ancient dragons, as soon as lizard dragons hatch, they immediately eat their own shells, and then for a long time they may not eat at all. As a hybrid of 3 species, amphibians, dragons, and evil creatures, the courtship of dragons and lizards cannot be uniform, it must focus on certain aspects. At the same time, that dragons, that beasts, that lizards are quite fastidious in food, they prefer food in the form of living beings. It seems now the young man has understood what the problem is. We need to look for a new recipe for the baby. After all, the teacher gives him a lot of money, and therefore the guy does not need to limit the dragon in food, so he should eat more and grow faster and stronger. Over the next few days, Su Heng fed his snake dragon lizard according to the recipes from the very book he had read earlier. Already at home, Su Heng was butchering a big fish and his baby really liked the new recipe. But it also led to a big problem. The guy was surprised that only 5 days had passed, and the baby had grown to a fairly large size. There wasn't even any money left. And it wasn't really a problem, but his little dragon overcame the childhood stage and entered adulthood. If they encounter the dogs again, which took a lot of strength and energy to fight back then, now his dragon will not be difficult. Su Heng suddenly imagined how his dragon could easily jump and strike the dogs and then easily tear them into small pieces. He can kill such a person in a couple of seconds with just one breath. With such strong scales, an ordinary person with a firearm poses absolutely no threat. Yes, even if 3 or 5 adult strong men, armed, faced a snake dragon lizard, they would be killed in a matter of seconds. Su Heng remembered that the teacher had asked to find him in the castle when his dragon entered the adult stage. Only now. It's amazing that only 5 days have passed since he stopped being a cub. Perhaps the recipe from that old book really refers to the drop perfectly or perfectly. And since that's the case, it's very important to be careful and keep it a secret. It seems that very soon the dragon of Su Heng will have to learn how to use his new skills. And it would be good to stop frequent formula feeding, at least for 10 days at least. 10 days later, Su Heng and his beast came to the castle again and started knocking on the doors to the teacher's office. Hearing an invitation to go inside on the other side of the door, the young man went in. The master said he hadn't seen the kid in this place for a long time. Is there really so much idling? The guy in response awkwardly scratched his head, sincerely apologized and said that he had been working hard all this time to develop his dragon so that he was strong, big and generally the best, so that he could not attend important training sessions. But he was very sorry. And by the way, thanks to the master's recipe, his dragon has successfully reached the adult stage. As soon as the master heard this news, he opened his eyes in amazement and was too surprised that the beast had grown so quickly. But for Su-hyun, growing up in 10 days seemed to be the norm. The teacher said it doesn't work that way. It took his 8th student Bai-su a month for her beast to progress from the childhood stage to the adult stage. So how fast I still need to eat besides. Her ice lotus is 2 levels lower than his snake dragon. In his head, Su-hyun is already really thinking about what would be much better without such a wild growth rate. The master said that we see that his dragon not only has outstanding abilities, but also has a unique potential for growth. If he is already an adult dragon, then he is probably already familiar with his new abilities. Now he has dragon power, 1st and 2nd degree, and these are 2 types of skills: dragon power, elimination, and dragon power, shock and awe. And the breath of evil thought was also raised to a new level and formed into a stream of evil thought. The master was shocked by what he heard. Is the guy just joking in such a short time? He managed not only to grow him, but also to teach him skills and develop them. The guy says that it's all thanks to the hard work of the master with him. And I thought to myself that it was still very good that he did not tell the master about the master dream of the dragon, force of nature, and evil attack. The master replied that he did not doubt the guy. Now they need to go to his training room and see what he is capable of now. After a while they found themselves in the private training ground of the mayor. The man asked Su-hyun's snake dragon lizard to prove himself in the best way and show what he had learned there in 10 days. And if it is true, as the young man described it, then the man will give him a personal talisman of the master. In the end, Su-hyun tried hard and went through a lot of obstacles. And how can you be a master without your convenient talisman? The guy mentally asked the kid not to let him down, because it depends on him whether the guy gets his talisman. The master summoned the stone armadillo bear to play with that cute baby dragon. The young man was stunned when he saw such a large and formidable beast. And I also asked the teacher how many more animals he has with the element of evil, because every time a man trains him, he calls for a new beast. The mayor laughed and said that he was still too weak. He has tamed only 10-20 high-class danger beasts, and only half of them are at the level of a stone bear or a lava tyrannosaurus. And now the guy has to show how much he wants the master's talisman. Let him show him everything the guy is capable of. It's time to see the results of his labors. The bear growled menacingly. And when the master saw the guy and his beast standing on their feet, he recognized the strength of the dragon, a holding barrier. It's not bad that a guy's dragon at the growth stage can resist an already full-fledged individual. Later, the master ordered the kid to attack with evil breath. Su-hyun told his dragon to use the stream of evil thoughts. The dragon exhaled a purple ball of power, but it wasn't strong enough for the bear. Did the dragon eat little porridge in the morning with this small ball? No more than a tickle for a bear. Then the guy asked to use the pearl of evil. The new force penetrated the bear's armor and the master praised him for it. He didn't think that the kid had learned the evil breath technique so well and would use it in attack. He used the accumulation of dark energy and was able to create a real series of shots, as if with bullets, having also built a series of very accurate attacks. Very good. The guy scratched his head. Awkwardly. He said that the teacher was overpraising him. In fact, there is another pearl of evil technique that attacks so accurately that the opponent cannot dodge. But only attacks of this level will not be able to penetrate the armor of the stone bear. The master said he was pleased with the young man's attacks, and so he handed him a talisman ring. Although it can't hold many animals like his, but it can still hold 5. There is enough space to accommodate 5 animals, and if his tamed animals make room a little, even 10 will fit. The guy thanked the master, but he said that it was too early to rejoice. Despite the fact that the guy has developed his technique and magic control quite well, his pain experience is at 0. Real fights are the best way to increase it. The master decided to send the guy to the northern section of their defense, where there will be a great opportunity to fight with dangerous types of animals. In 3 days he has to report to the military headquarters and inform, and then someone will give him an appointment. Behind the high walls of blacklight there are 4 defensive lines that guard the entire base. Each section of the defensive lines consists of military camps, and a lot of animal tamers along with specially trained military with firearms. The southern and northern borders are the most dangerous. There is a battle with dangerous species almost every day. Most of the materials in the city related to dangerous types of beasts were also the results of the hunting of the 4 main frontiers. Within 3 days, Su-hyun collected his advance for the next month of benefits for animal tamers in the amount of as much as 250,000 yuan. He spent most of this amount buying ingredients for food for his dragon, as well as 3 whole days preparing these ingredients into formulas in order to preserve the food for as long as possible. By agreement with the military headquarters of the outer fortress, Su-hyun went to the northern frontier, Post 7, as a member of the team. The 4 defensive lines on the base's territory were created largely for the plantations located in these wild places. In the end, the area of land from which you can harvest is limited and the total harvest of 7 plantations inside the gathering cannot meet the needs of 50-60,000 people living in the city. Working on plantations outside the city is second only to joining search teams in terms of the degree of danger, and this is also one of the most dangerous industries that the residents of the base are trying to avoid. If Su-hyun's memory does not change, Ku Dinkwon, the head of Plantation number 5, was assigned to Plantation number 30. which was located in the security zone of the northern line of defense. The military car drove up to the right place at the 7th observation point and wished the guy good luck, because he had to come back and report. 2 guys were standing somewhere upstairs and were surprised that the chief of staff himself brought the newcomer. The second young man asked the first one if he had not heard that this novice master tamer had his luggage literally stuffed with rations for taming animals. Reddish was surprised and said that then they urgently need to go and help this newcomer. The guys ran to Mr. Suhang and started carrying his things, asking how he could carry his own things. They will do everything for him without any problems. The young man did not expect such pressure, and before he had time to answer at least something, the guys continued. The red-haired man said his last name was Huang, but Suhang could call him Xiao Huang. Why, after all, from now on, the safety of the 7th point depends only on Suhang. Suhang was embarrassed by such excessive politeness because Xiao Huang was older than him, so the guy would call him Huangji. From this, Huang almost burst into tears, because for the first time he meets a non-pompous master tamer. He shouted to the others to move quickly, and then they could have a feast for Mr. Su. There are only 29 guard posts on the northern border, and Suhang must report on the situation at the 7th guard post. More than 10 years ago, it was blown to pieces by a flying by dangerous species that did not leave a single survivor at the guard post. Since then, the entire modern guard post number 7 has been rebuilt on the ruins. This will be the place where Suhang will break into his first real fight. After a while, Suhang found himself in the dining room and Huangji brought him a plate of Awan dishes. Although they do not have special conditions for cooking delicious food, but his cooking is simply excellent. Su asked Huangji to call him by his first name. They are comrades in arms, and it would be too strange if he addressed the guy as Mr. Su. Master Tamer is a very important person, so Han will call him Suji. The guy agreed to this and said that he would call him Suji, and he was Huangji, and at the same time everyone was thinking about his own. And Su would also like to ask if they often have dangerous types of animals here. The blonde guy who was eating a chicken leg said that here they are. After all, somewhere on the middle line, so the pressure on the defense, of course, is less than at more distant posts. But still, there are a lot of fish in this place that can slip through the net. Behind Suji was a bunch of dangerous beasts that they had caught over the past few days. In the middle and at the end of each month, a military officer comes to this place with a team from the city, which is responsible for transporting rare resources and counting rewards. Suhang noted that it is really very difficult to do this without a tamed beast. Another guy asked what the Su beast could do if he could show it to them, to which Huang yelled at him. Is he really impudent at all? Does he not know the rules of tamed animals? But at this time, Suhang just stood up and summoned his tamed beast. The dragon flew out of the talisman ring. The guys couldn't believe that a very dangerous and rare kind of dragon lizard appeared in front of them. Su introduced him to the guys who couldn't take their eyes off the beast. One of the guys asked if Suji really has the first tamed beast. The most dangerous kind is just awesome. The dragon demonstrated dragon power, shock and awe, which scared one of the guys. But the owner quickly subdued him and said that the dragon should not dare to attack his own. No manners. Su asked Xiao who if he was okay, and he replied that he was fine. Suji's beast is very strong, and he is a great master himself. The guys who were standing on the sidelines began to make fun of Xiao who, because in fact he almost peed his pants out of fear, and the boy was embarrassed and asked his comrades to stop, because there was nothing like that. After the meal, Suhang got to know all his 5 brothers in the post. After a short recovery, Suhang, on the advice of his mentor, began to train the power of the mind, using the spiritual hammer. The method that his mentor advised him is called Crystal Mind and consists of 3 stages. The first stage is to remove all distractions and create a crystal environment for meditation around yourself, meditating as if on a giant crystal. The second stage is working with a specific breathing rhythm, when the mind gradually becomes one with the meditative environment. And finally, the third stage with the underlying spiritual hammer method. With the current progress of the guy, it will take him only half a year to reach a crystal clear mind, as, in general, the teacher told him. A monster like Sister Baisu, who has refined her mind to crystal clarity in just a month or so, she must be really bright like this moon. Suddenly, a beacon started flashing in the tower, and the guy realized that it was an alarm signal. Huangji rushed into his room and told him that they needed to get down to business faster. It was late at night outside. A bright moon was shining. Red beetles were visible in the binoculars, and it seemed to Su that this was a dangerous species of the 2nd rank, a barefoot beetle. Instead of paws, he has armored claws, Serbs who can easily split a cobblestone. This is a dangerous species of the 2nd rank, the scythe beetle. Huang said it was the most common kind of beast in their sector. Although these insects multiply rapidly, killing 4 beetles at once is not a problem. Huangji gathered the team and said that everyone should prepare for battle. He and Lack Yu will be at the machine gun position of the watchtower. Owan will take the forward sniper position on the northwest side. Xiao Hu will guard the 5th and 6th shootings on the 1st level. Then Huang asked the guys to help Suji finish off the suckers with this. The bullet flew straight at the beetle. A dangerous kind of ability is perception. Reception, the imposition of armor. The bullet was able to penetrate the red armor, the dome of the Beetle. Juan was at the helm and firing a machine gun at the bugs. He was pleased that they had killed 1,000 at once. Only the main thing to remember is not to blow their heads off. Otherwise they will not be given any military awards for this. The guy remembered that the Scythe Beetle's best skill is armor overlay. It is not particularly effective, but significantly weakens the effect of ordinary bullets. Continuously firing a machine gun. You can create a great opportunity for a sniper too. Su looked up into the sky and saw how, while the Beetle's armor was destroyed due to a hail of bullets, the sniper shoots at the Beetle itself, thereby demolishing his head. Here it is, the battlefield of the northern frontier. Although all these guys are not master tamers, but their understanding of the situation and skill, honed in repeated battles, is enough to provide all the necessary combat power. The bugs died one by one, until the guys noticed that one of them was boldly running away from them. He needs to be killed urgently. The fighters took the car and chased the Beetle. Huang gave orders. He ordered one guy to keep an eye on the internal border because everything is gilded there, so you need to be on the alert. Su Heng got off the car and stood not far from it, looking at the Beetle that was among the trees. First, you need to see what will happen to him after the evil attack. The guy released the dragon from the ring, and he released his power, which did not penetrate the Beetle's armor. He's poor, flew off to the side, raising clouds of smoke and dust behind him. It seems that his armor really worked so well that it repelled the guy's attack and received almost no damage. Su then ordered the snake dragon to use the stream of evil thoughts, the pearl of evil. All the power flew into the Beetle again, but again nothing happened. This Beetle has a pretty thick skin. The next attack was shock and awe, and the Beetle again thought of running away from the dragon. But it wasn't there. The guy ordered the dragon to use the powers of the earth and then the Beetle was pierced through. Everyone who had been in the van before froze in amazement. It seems that Suji doesn't need their help at all. That's the sight. It gives me goosebumps. Later, the guys shared their impressions of what they saw. Suji was a real hero, used different attacks and was able to defeat the bug. Juan put his hand on his shoulder and shared his thoughts that he used to think that he, like sweaty beginners, just decided to get rich. But the guy is a real nugget himself. Right now, Juan is very impressed. Su is really cool. It was awkward for the young man, because he was not the only one trying. Suddenly some kid came running and said that someone was coming to them. Wang and Su decided to take a look and ran to the sick. From a height they saw that a command convoy with a bunch of trucks was approaching them. It was very strange, because usually when recounting military supplies, the command comes to them only by noon after they visit each watchtower and post. So why did they arrive so early today? Su-hen had a hunch. A blond man with a cigarette in his mouth got out of the truck. It was the commander-in-chief of the Northern Defensive Line, Lu Ling. The guys greeted him, and the man recognized Huan, who, after so many years, hadn't changed a bit at all. Huang was moved because he didn't think the commander-in-chief remembered his name. He's so flattered. She had come all this way on purpose to work with them. But the man waved off and said that it was less than a 10-minute drive from the barrier to here, so the path was not difficult. Then Lu Ling lifted his sunglasses, approached the newcomer and asked how he was getting used to his new place. Su Heng began to mumble that he needed to report something there, and stuttered began to say that Su Heng had met all his comrades in the service, and he had adapted well to life here. And also the guy saluted. But suddenly he felt the hand of a man on his head, who approvingly said that it was not necessary to talk to him so formally. The teacher had already told him a couple of times that he had taken a new very talented student. And he also heard the chief of staff say that the guy didn't see him when he came to the headquarters, and that they just missed each other last time because the guy went to exterminate those stupid bastards. But Lu decided to come again to see Su Heng in person again. The guys on the sidelines could not believe. Did the commander-in-chief come to their tiny post just for the sake of Su Hna? Huang thought that Su was an ordinary master, but did not know that he was a personal disciple of their mayor. It was lucky that he didn't cause any trouble during this time. The commander-in-chief held a cigarette between his teeth and asked the guys why they were frozen like pillars. They should take stock of the battles over the last half a month on the post and not interfere with them with Su Heng. Lu then asked Suji to summon his snake dragon lizard. The mentor specifically instructed the man to come and monitor the development of the guy, then to report everything to the master. The guy was surprised. He thought that the mentor had forgotten about him at all as soon as the guy left the city. And it turns out that he has already sent his spy. The guy summoned a dragon, and it flew into the sky. The commander-in-chief was fascinated by such a sight and asked Su Heng if his dragon had not hatched a little less than a month ago. The young man replied that his dragon had grown very quickly since he learned how to use dragon magic. Lu Ling said that he asked just like that, and his at one time grew even more even. After finishing with the side questions, Lu said that the mentor asked him to find out how well the guy had honed his dragon's fighting skills. Lu has his own tamed dragon too, so he'll let him check it out. Lu has summoned my dragon, the Horned Earth Dragon. The Horned Earth Dragon is a dangerous species with two bloodlines, Earth and Dragon, with the same racial rank as the dragon snake lizard. He was bred by Lu Ling to the level of a full-fledged dangerous species, Thanks to his thick skin and horns, he is able to withstand second-rank beasts at the end of his growth for a short period of time. And this is one of the main advantages of Lu Ling. A huge earth dragon touched his claw to the forehead of the baby, and he was a little scared. Then Suheng asked Lu to tell his beast to be gentle with the baby, otherwise he would just trample his dragon with one of his paws. The man assured the guy that his dragon knows the measure, so he will not harm the blue dragon. The young man confided in the elder and said that everything was fine then. The blonde noticed that it looks like the snake dragon has not woken up yet, so it needs to be woken up by a small earthquake. The horned dragon stamped his paw on the ground with all his might, which even cracked. Levitation is an advantage of the ability to control spiritual power after training the power of mind. But now there is no time to think about it at all. So Su told his beast to use an evil attack and dodge the blows. The dragon pushed off from his master's shoulders. Then the guy ordered his snake dragon to use evil pearls against this horned dragon, but it had durability without damage. Counting on Su Heng's dragon to defeat the horned dragon is just a dream. Yes, even to lose beautifully would be very cool. All the guy can do is show the results of the development of his dragon, which he has achieved in all this short time, and not disappoint the teacher, who is so worried, being tens of kilometers away from him. Su shouted to the kid that his advantage was speed, so he had to surround the big dragon with evil pearls. The kid was attacked again. There was purple light everywhere. He even made purple rays from the mouth towards the big dragon. But since he didn't have enough strength, he needed to use the power of the earth to recover quickly. Then the dragon's power was needed, the dance of the earth, and large stones grew out of the earth. However, as soon as the elder dragon stamped his paw, the baby flew back. Looking after all these, Lu Ling laughed and praised the guy for a good tactic. However, his dragon's powers are already at the 9th level, so his earth dance is nothing to him. The young man asked if it wasn't Lu who told the guy to use everything he could so as not to disappoint his teacher. The commander-in-chief grunted, scratched his head and said that he did not want to offend the guy. It really looks like this. But the man just already understands what snake lizard dragons are capable of. So the guy's attacks are quite good, and most likely the teacher will be very pleased. This snake dragon is developing much faster than the commander-in-chief's dragon was developing. Their teacher really took in a very talented student. Soon after the commander-in-chief's departure, winter came and it was wildly cold at the guard post. The walls were not as high and strong as on their base, able to shelter from the winter cold. The blonde man got up from his sleeping bag, suture teeth from the cold. And it was only the beginning of a harsh winter. The guy from the next bag told him that then you need to become a master tamer, because he has a spiritual cover and he is warm. Suddenly an alarm sounded and all the soldiers jumped up from their sleeping places. Sentry post number 3 in the northern part called, and they said that plantation number 25 was attacked by a group of dangerous species. Wang began to assign everyone to their assignments. Xiaohu and Suhi, they will go together on a call from the 3rd post, and Lak Yu and Awen will guard the house. The guys obediently ran to follow orders. According to Captain Li, the situation is really serious now, since almost the entire 25th plantation has been completely captured. More than 20 individuals of a dangerous species entered the territory, and not about 5 less dangerous ones. All the plantation workers are now locked in the staff quarters. They have about a dozen broken guns, with which they somehow fight back. But it's only a matter of time before the beasts get inside. The detachment is going to gather support for all the posts of Patrol Aza number 3 and number 4 in the northern sector, as well as the main forces that will almost completely come out to protect the plantation. The collection should be completed by 4 o'clock in the morning, since the attack will begin at exactly this time. It was already 3:40 on the clock, so Huang ordered Xiaohu to get ready faster and go to the place. Putting his hand to his head, Huang Ji said to report to Sir. Huang Chengju, Zhao Sohu and Su Huan from post number 7 on the northern border arrived at the designated place. The guy with the walkie-talkie asked Huang Ji to enter the territory faster, because he would transmit information over the walkie-talkie. In the truck, a voice came through the receiver saying that they had conducted a reconnaissance. Those bastards broke in through the 6th gate on the northwest side. Now they are in the grain area, tearing pieces out of dead bodies. All the survivors were moved to the staff quarters and are now defending themselves, strengthening the protection. All fighting squads. All vehicles will line up in the shape of a spear. 2 armored vehicles will be used as spear tips, directly attacking and opening fire on the dormitory building on the plantation. Everyone should be very careful. The dangerous species that invaded this place are dangerous wolves that are resistant to attacks and can easily bite off their head. They urgently need to be killed and free the people who are trying to defend themselves. Meanwhile, the tanks tried to smash the wolves, but they seemed too strong. One wolf climbed to the top of the cliff and began to howl. Su Heng walked up to the car seat and asked Xiaohu to pull back a little because he sensed something was wrong. Juan asked how it was, and then the young man asked him if he had heard that wild howl. He had heard from his teacher that such a dangerous species as the poisonous wolf could evolve into the ultimate form of the alpha wolf. The driver shouted that something was wrong and called Suji to look. Wolves are strangely moving away. What are they up to? The wolf that stood staring must have been their leader, because he directs them. No wonder so many individuals broke through the fortifications. The poison wolf's skill is poison mist. Therefore, the whole army of cargo got into a thick poisonous fog, which they did not expect in any way. Suji told everyone to turn on the infrared sight and be on everyone's guard and not miss their teammates. It's not that simple. The guy asked Zio who to pull back a little. And at that time, in the side window, Wang Ji saw a wolf running next to their car. The wolf broke through the window of the car and then completely chewed it. It was just a shadow wolf companion. The special ability of the leader of the poisonous wolves is a shadow double, which means there is another leader here. The guys saw that he was approaching the halo and a huge wolf crashed into the side of their truck. Because of this, it was very difficult for Huan to hit the beast. Huan couldn't even break through his thick armor a little bit. The wolf jumped on the car with all his might. And then Su Heng steps in, who quickly summoned his snake dragon. The dragon appeared and began to use the power of the dragon, shock and awe. Then a stream of evil thoughts and pearls of evil. All this hit the wolf in a terrible head over heels, and he fell off the car. Su took the radio and asked the commander to cease fire to avoid accidental injuries. The guy will take care of the leader of the poisonous wolves. The guard watched through his binoculars at the scene of the battle, and thought that it was not surprising that the student of the mayor coped. He did it with such force, even though he was still at the training stage. The man ordered on the radio to cease all fire to support military vehicle number 10 in the northern sector. And the leader of the poisonous wolves is completely on Mr. Su Heng. They will do the rest of the little things, so as not to interfere with the main battle with the leader of the pack. Su Heng jumped down from the high truck bed, but because of the too thick poisonous fog that was everywhere and seemed to envelop the entire space between people, it was impossible to understand where the leader of the wolves was hiding. But suddenly Huang Ji pointed to the side and they saw that the wolf was just tearing one of the cars with its claws. The people inside were screaming and calling for someone to help him, and then Suji came. He summoned his snake dragon lizard from the talisman ring, and he threw power at the wolf. However, it turned out to be only a breath of wind to the wolf. He became even more angry. The guy who had called for help before thanked the master Tamer for saving him, because he already thought that he would die like that. But the young man did not appreciate such politeness and shouted to the guy not to stand like a pillar, but rather get out of this place. But still, the poisonous wolf got to that guy and threw him far away. When the dragon began to use his powers, the wolf activated his ability, an ominous blow. This was a great opportunity to shoot at the beast, so Su Heng shouted at Zio who to shoot. Wang Ji and Zio who simultaneously started firing at the wolf with their machine guns, and he was trying to escape from so many attacks in his direction. But Su Heng foresaw this, and therefore ordered his dragon to use shock and awe. The dragon hit the wolf with all his might. Later, Su Heng and Wang Ji sat in the back of the truck that was taking them back to the base, and were especially silent. Everyone wanted to put their thoughts in order a little after what happened. The red-haired man asked how the guy was feeling and if he was in a bad mood, because he saw that Su Heng was sitting with his head down all the way and thinking about something of his own, as if he was not here at all. The young man replied to Wang Ji that everything was fine with him. He was just deep in thought. Wang Ji tried to diffuse the dejected situation a little and began to talk about the fact that previously they usually did not attract master tamers for invasions of this scale. But if it wasn't for the guy, there would have been at least twice as many losses. This time, Suji really saved them all. Then the man pulled up his sleeve and asked the guy if he saw a scar there. He's had it since he first fought to save the plantation. And that battle was much more terrible than this one. More than 50 people died in it. The armored car was smashed to scrap by a huge steel gorilla in mature form, which turned the whole crew into mush. And in the end, it was Mr. Cow, the then commander-in-chief of the Northern Front, who personally killed the beast and ended that bloody battle. Wang Ji handed the young man a flask and asked for a drink to make it a little easier. He thanked him. Huan said that all this is inevitable. They are all ordinary people. They live here like floating leaves, without roots and support. And no one can guarantee that they will fall asleep today and wake up tomorrow and see the same bright sun. Only if they were master tamers like the guy, then they really would have the opportunity to control their fate. Suji put his hand on the man's shoulder and said that he needed to stop thinking about it all and just get home as soon as possible. Juan really wants to eat the food that Awan has prepared for them. The man rushed around, agreed and said that they needed to eat everything and more so that Avan would even get tired of cooking. The battle to save the plantation was the first time Su Heng faced death face to face. He seemed like a real fighter who, after this nightmare, finally realized that only constant effort can help save himself and protect others in this chaotic world.